Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sydney Loof. Sydney Irene Loof was born on August 21, 1993, in Broken Bow, Nebraska. She grew up in Arcadia with her parents, George and Susie Loof. In 2000, when she was in second grade, her family moved to Norfolk. Her mother, Susie, worked as a special education teacher, and her father, George, was a school principal. Sydney was an active child and enjoyed a happy childhood filled with a love of nature. She loved fishing, an activity her father often took her to do. During her school years, she participated in basketball and golf, and showed outstanding potential in both sports. However, she developed scoliosis, which affected the curvature of her spine and forced her to give up many of her favorite hobbies and sports. In 2011, after finishing high school, Sydney began working at a Menards store that focused on home improvement products. The Loof family was very attached, and when Sydney needed to move from Norfolk to Lincoln for her job, they all made an effort to stay in touch nearly every day and often gathered for dinner. Although Sydney lived on her own, she frequently returned to her parents' house. Recently, however, she had been dealing with depression and felt that her medications were not helping, but rather worsening her condition. Susie, concerned for her daughter, recommended a new doctor who prescribed different medications for her. During phone calls with her mom, Sydney expressed that she was starting to feel normal again, sounding quite optimistic. She was trying to make positive changes in her life and was searching for a new job. Working in a store wasn't her ultimate goal. She felt there was more out there for her. However, she was uncertain about her career path and what she truly wanted, which contributed to her feelings of depression. In November 2017, Sydney's mental health worsened, leading her to start taking antidepressants and occasionally smoke marijuana. Although her family and friends were very supportive, but she was looking for more than just companionship. She wanted love. Being young and modern, Sydney was interested in women, so she often searched for dates on social media. She used Tinder, an app that helps people connect for dating, to find friends and romantic interests. During that month, she matched with a girl named Audrey, who responded to her message. They began chatting and discovered they shared many interests, including gambling, hiking, and enjoying good food. After exchanging about 100 messages, Sydney and Audrey decided to meet in person on November 14th. Sydney traveled to Audrey's house in Wilbur, and their first meeting was a success, leaving Sydney very happy. They enjoyed each other's company and agreed to meet again at Audrey's house on November 15th. After finishing her shift at the store, Sydney went home to get ready. She cleaned up, styled her hair, and did her makeup before heading out. She took a selfie and posted it on Tinder with the caption, "Ready for date." Shortly after posting, she received a message from Audrey, who was waiting for her in the car. The following day, Sydney failed to arrive at work. Her family, who had noticed her recent happiness due to a new friend, became worried. When her co-workers reported her absence, they were surprised, as this behavior was uncharacteristic of their responsible daughter. Susie mentioned that Sydney had been struggling with anxiety and severe depression. Just days before she went missing, Sydney had spoken with her family about her worsening mental health, and they had recommended that she see a doctor to resume her antidepressant medication. That was the last time her family saw her. Sydney's parents visited her apartment and were shocked to find that Sydney had left her beloved cat, Mimsy, without food or water. This was very unusual for Sydney, as they knew how much she cared for her cat and never left it alone for long periods. Worried for her well-being, they reported Sydney missing to the police. The apartment was locked, and when the police conducted a welfare check, they found nothing unusual. However, the family insisted that something was wrong, and the police took their concerns seriously. On November 16, 2017, a 5 feet 7 inches blonde named Sydney was reported missing after not showing up for her shift at the Menards store located at 27th Street and Cornhusker Highway. She had a spinal condition that affected her walking, making her easily recognizable. When she went missing, she was wearing a white Columbia jacket and a cream-colored shirt. Her parents told the police that earlier that week, on Wednesday morning, Sydney had shared on Snapchat that she had gone on a date with a woman she met online the previous Tuesday night and planned to see her again that Wednesday evening. Sydney's car was found in northeast Lincoln, and the police are interviewing people and searching for any clues about her or her location. Her family has been handing out flyers suggesting she may have been abducted 40 miles southwest of Lincoln, where her cell phone last connected. The flyers also mentioned that there has been no activity in her bank account and that her phone was turned off the night she went missing. The flyers included a description of Sydney and highlighted her notable features, such as several tattoos, one on her arm that says, "Everything will be great someday," yin yang symbol beneath her elbow, and the word "believe" on her wrist. Anyone who has information about Sydney's location is encouraged to contact the police by phone. A massive search for Sydney was launched. Billboards were placed on freeways with her picture. A manhunt was also broadcast on television news. Sydney's mother, Susie, continued to assert that something had happened to her daughter after that date. To support her this thing, she shared a screenshot of a Snapchat post from Sydney that included her picture and the caption, "Ready for date." Sydney's friends also confirmed that she was going on a date with a woman named Audrey, whom she had met through Tinder. During the investigation, police examined Sydney's phone records and surveillance footage from her workplace. They quickly identified a person of interest. The last time Sydney's phone was used, it connected to a cell tower in the Wilbur neighborhood, likely close to Audrey's home. However, the police did not know who Audrey was. They started looking for a woman named Audrey, the last individual to see Sydney alive, but they faced challenges in locating her because no one knew her real name. Sydney's friend Brooklyn stepped in to help the police by searching for Audrey on Tinder. After downloading the app, she located Audrey and they exchanged phone numbers. This led the police to discover that Audrey's real name was 26-year-old Bailey Boswell. They also found out that Bailey lived near the cell tower where Sydney's phone was last connected. Additionally, it was revealed that Bailey shared her apartment with her partner, 52-year-old Aubrey Trail. Bailey and Aubrey are two individuals with contrasting backgrounds. Bailey Boswell was raised in a typical family in Lyons, Iowa. As a child, she was sociable and performed well academically, also finding success in basketball and running. However, after the death of her father, her life took a different turn. Following her high school graduation, Bailey fell into a troubling lifestyle that involved alcohol and drugs. It was during this time that she met Aubrey on a dating website. Aubrey Trail had a problematic history, facing several fraud charges, including writing bad checks and theft. He established a cult where he referred to himself as Vampire Daddy and paid women $200 a week to adhere to his strange rules. When Sydney disappeared, Aubrey and Bailey were court-ordered to pay over $40,000 due to their fraud cases, and they had multiple misdemeanors. Despite this, the couple was able to evade the authorities. On November 19, 2017, after a warrant was issued, police conducted a search of Bailey in Aubrey's home. During the search, they found that some walls had been scrubbed with bleach. A neighbor confirmed this, stating they had noticed a strong smell of bleach 2 days earlier. After that, the police made more efforts to find the suspects. While evading capture, Bailey and Aubrey posted videos on Facebook denying any involvement in Sydney's disappearance and expressing their hope for her safe return. Bailey mentioned that she had gone on 2 dates with Sydney but had dropped her off at a friend's house, after which she never heard from Sydney again. Bailey added that she just wanted Sydney's family to know that she was really sorry, but she had nothing to do with it. She hoped that Sydney would be found very soon, as Sydney was a lovely, amazing girl. After several days, the police tracked down Bailey Boswell and Audrey Trail at a hotel in Branson, Missouri. They were arrested weeks after Sydney was reported missing. Through a detailed analysis of phone records and Bailey's location history, investigators found Sydney's remains, which had been dismembered into 14 pieces. 13 of these body parts were discovered in black plastic garbage bags in ditches in Clay County, with some of her part, such as her heart, missing. The situation was horrific. In total, 16 crime scenes were connected to Sydney's remains or her personal belongings, including her car keys, driver's license, and phone case, which were found along the highway. These locations were consistent with the suspects' movements, Bailey and Audrey. Forensic experts performed autopsies on the 13 body parts that were found. They found abrasions on Sydney's wrists, a bump on her head, torn earlobes, and various bruises, contusions on her back. These injuries suggested that Sydney had struggled to defend herself. The tragic finding devastated not only Sydney's family and friends but also the entire community of Nebraska. On December 11, 2017, the Loof family held a private funeral for Sydney at her lifelong Lutheran church. Bailey and Audrey faced charges of first-degree murder, improper disposal of human remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Bailey pleaded not guilty to all charges, while Audrey pleaded not guilty to felony murder and conspiracy but admitted guilt regarding the improper disposal of human remains. Audrey's testimonies were inconsistent. Each time he spoke, he appeared increasingly confused, altering his statements and introducing new elements and characters into the story. After his arrest, Audrey spoke to the police about the cult that he and Bailey belonged to. He discussed witchcraft and claimed that he was a vampire capable of flying. Audrey presented himself as the cult leader and insisted that there were witches in the group who needed to kill another woman to gain powers. During one of Audrey's early court hearings, he confessed to killing Sydney but insisted it was an accident. Audrey explained that he paid Sydney $5,000 to fulfill a fantasy with 2 other women. Sydney agreed to this, but she tragically died during the encounter when he accidentally strangled her with a cord. Audrey admitted to dismembering the body Sydney as part of a ritual tied to his religious beliefs. He said he needed to drain her blood to free her soul for the gods in a sacred location and arranged her body parts to aid in her reincarnation. However, this account was proven to be false. Surveillance footage from November 14 captured Bailey and Audrey checking into a hotel in Lincoln, close to Sydney's residence. The following day, November 15, they went to a home improvement store, where they were seen purchasing a disturbing selection of tools, a hacksaw, bleach, a folding saw, a utility knife, and bags intended for Sydney's remains. On November 15 at 12:01 p.m., a surveillance camera recorded Sydney and Audrey crossing paths at the Menards store during business hours. At that moment, Sydney did not know who Audrey was or how their lives would become intertwined in a tragic way. On June 11, 2018, the first court hearing took place regarding the murder and improper burial of Sydney's remains. The court ordered separate trials for the defendants, Bailey and Audrey, although the charges against them were essentially the same. The trials were held in Lexington because the attorneys argued that Bailey and Audrey would not receive a fair trial in Wilbur due to the extensive media coverage of the case. The prosecution argued that Sydney was murdered through strangulation in a premeditated attack. Audrey and Bailey were identified as the leaders of a group that recruited young women into intimate activities. To find these women, Bailey used Tinder. During the trial, the jury heard from 3 other women who had previously been in relationships with Audrey and Bailey, and they shared that they also met these men on Tinder. All of these women had been involved with Bailey and had engaged in intimate activities with both Bailey and Audrey. One woman testified that she traveled with Audrey and was given a weekly allowance of $200. She claimed he invited her to join his cult, which he referred to as involving witches. To join, he told her she would need to torture and kill someone. She also mentioned that Bailey was called the Witch Queen. Another woman added that Bailey often talked about breaking her fingers and expressed a desire to dismember bodies. All three women emphasized that both Bailey and Audrey actively participated in these discussions about torture and criminal acts. It is surprising that in today's world, some people still believe in the terrifying concept of exorcism and try to persuade others of its validity. The prosecution reviewed the investigation and the evidence gathered to piece together what happened on the tragic evening of November 15, 2017. Sydney was preparing for a date with a woman she had recently met through Tinder. Bailey picked Sydney up from her apartment, and they started driving in Bailey's car. Eventually, they arrived at Bailey's house, where Sydney was drawn into the apartment. As soon as she entered, Bailey and Audrey attacked her and strangled her with an extension cord on the living room floor. Bailey and Audrey then cleaned the apartment thoroughly, an action the prosecution claimed was planned in advance. They subsequently dismembered Sydney and disposed of her remains in Clay County. The next day, on November 16, the court heard from their landlord, Jennifer Cull. She testified that when she drove into the garage, she noticed a strong smell of chlorine, which became more intense when she entered the house. The medical examiner concluded that Sydney's death was a homicide caused by asphyxiation. Toxicology reports revealed that Sydney had antidepressants in her system. The court discovered that, in addition to the missing parts, Sydney's upper left arm, specifically the section above the elbow and below the shoulder, was also unaccounted for. Prosecutors have recommended the death penalty for the two suspects. They have also said they will review the case if the verdict is deemed unfair. Meanwhile, Audrey again denied any involvement in occult activities and only admitted to improperly burying the remains. During his trial, he exclaimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death, shouting, "Bailey is innocent, damn you all." Then, he attempted to end his life by slashing his throat 3 times with a razor blade. However, he survived and was placed in custody until he fully recovered. Audrey did not attend court for several weeks after that. The next time he appeared was during the defense phase, specifically when he was scheduled to testify. When he entered the courtroom, he smirked and told the judge, "He will be good." It's uncommon for defendants to testify in their own trials, as defense attorneys often advise against it. This is because testifying can lead to complications during cross-examination. Some defendants may reveal too much information, struggle to answer questions clearly, or become confrontational with attorneys, which can negatively influence jurors. However, in Audrey's case, his situation was different since he had many interactions with the police following his arrest. Audrey had initially shared his account of incident with the police, but during the trial, he wanted to change his story. He chose to skip most of the trial and only attended the final hearing, where his noticeable scars were evident. When he testified in his defense, Audrey shocked his attorneys by admitting that he had previously lied to both the authorities and his legal team regarding the death of Sydney. In his testimony, he confessed that he met Sydney in March 2017 and paid her to take part in his illegal activities because she was in need of money. He claimed they lost contact, but in November 2017, he reached out to Sydney again. She needed money, and Audrey explained that this was the reason he was at Menards that day. On November 15, Audrey offered to pay Sydney $55,000 to she join his antiques gang. Later that night, Audrey, Bailey, and Sydney became intimate, but unfortunately, Sydney accidentally choked to death due to an extension cord used during their activities. Audrey stated that he didn't know if Sydney had a seizure or something. But that was when she stopped breathing. In court, he clarified that there was no ritual involved in dismembering Sydney's body and that claims about witches, vampires, and blood-sucking were false. Audrey admitted that he had only dismembered Sydney because he couldn't fit her body in the car. Audrey stated that he panicked and discarded Sydney's body in a field in Clay County at dawn on November 16. When questioned about why he didn't seek help if Sydney's death was accidental, he claimed that no one would believe him. Audrey confessed to disposing of Sydney's body but insisted that her death was accidental, occurring while they were playing with an extension cord. During Bailey's trial, she did not admit to any wrongdoing. In fact, her lawyers argued that she was also a victim of Audrey. Her attorney told the court that when she met Audrey, she was a vulnerable young woman, living alone and working as a waitress in Princeton, Missouri. The defense claimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death or the handling of her remains. But this turned out to be untrue. Bailey's cell phone, which she used to access her Tinder account, was located near where Sydney's body parts were discovered. Through a thorough examination of Bailey's phone and location data, police were able to locate all of Sydney's remains. The court also found out that Bailey was the one who reached out to Sydney and set up a meeting. Bailey drove to Sydney's to pick her up on the evening of November 15th. The prosecution informed the court that Bailey found pleasure in discussing cruelty and enjoyed conversations about torture with Audrey. Evidence presented during the trial indicated that a crime had been planned. On the day of Sydney's murder, Audrey and Bailey were together at a store where they purchased tools such as a hacksaw, scissors, and a box cutter from Home Depot. Around noon that day, Bailey sent Sydney a text asking how her day was going. Phone records and surveillance footage confirmed that Bailey was in the Menards parking lot with Audrey when she sent this message on Tinder. Despite working at Menards, but it seems that Sydney did not realize Bailey was there. A few hours later, Bailey sent Sydney a message on Tinder, said that her was at her apartment and would pick Sydney up soon. However, phone records reveal that instead of going on a date, they went to the apartment where Bailey and Audrey lived. Bailey's attorney, Todd Lancaster, argued that the evidence indicated Bailey had bought bleach in garbage bags for the purpose of disposing of Sydney's body. This could result in charges of aiding and abetting the improper disposal of human remains. On November 8, 2021, Bailey Boswell was sentenced to life in prison. The Loof family has been searching for justice for 3 years, grieving the loss of their beloved daughter, Sydney. They hoped for a judgment that would bring them some peace. On July 11, 2019, a jury took less than 3 hours to find Audrey Trail guilty of planning a murder and improperly disposing of human remains. The 3 judges described his actions as cold and calculated. In the second part of the trial, which determined his punishment, the county prosecutors fulfilled their commitment and secured the death penalty for Audrey Trail. Consequently, he was executed by lethal injection on June 9, 2021. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sean Eckerd. Donna and Samuel Eckerd were a couple who were related before they got married. Both had experienced unsuccessful marriages before and had a total of 6 adult children. After a difficult past, they found peace with each other and decided to move to San Diego, California, to start a new life. There, they rented a spacious house and regularly attended local church activities on weekends. The family was very religious and lived a quiet life without much social interaction. A few years after moving, the family welcomed their first son, Stanley, and 2 years later, their second son, Sean. Donna devoted all her time to taking care of the house and raising the 2 children, so the boys grew up surrounded by love and care. Both attended a good local school. On weekends, the family participated in church activities. As adults, the 2 children left their parents to start their own family's acros. The country. However, the Eckerd family still maintained a close relationship. They often contacted each other, called each other, and spent all their holidays together. Sean was a cheerful and easygoing boy. He was attractive, intelligent, and a good listener, so he made friends easily. In contrast, Stanley was a bit shy and found socializing difficult. He was often reserved about new things and had trouble communicating with his younger brother. Despite their different personalities, the two brothers were very close and cared for each other. They had the same group of friends and were always ready to help one another. Both were well-behaved and good at studying. The relationship between Sean and Stanley was very good. They trusted each other and often joked happily. Their parents also supported this relationship. In the family, mutual respect was highly valued. Donna and Samuel raised their children in the faith and the law of God from an early age. The Eckerd family lived quietly. Vs. As they grew up, the two brothers developed very different interests. Sean, the youngest, played in a band, while Stanley, the oldest, loved martial arts. Every evening, the family gathered before dinner to share their experiences of the day. Sean was usually the first to tell a story, and stories about music, friends, and his future plans took up most of the time. Everyone listened attentively to Sean. Stanley, on the other hand, had few opportunities to share and did not feel like he had much to say. He had no big plans for the future, nor interesting stories or experiences with friends to hold attention. So Stanley often listened quietly to his younger brother's stories. One evening, Sean told his family about Mary Jane, his new neighbor. She was a beautiful young woman with bright brown eyes and long blonde hair. Sean was fascinated by the wonderful piano music coming from her house. Enthralled by the music, Sean boldly entered the house without knocking. Although the situation was somewhat awkward, Sean handled it with confidence and grace, making a good impression on Mary Jane. Although she was a few years older than Sean, they became close friends. Sean often organized picnics and invited Mary Jane to join. They went on many walks together, visiting parks and observatories. However, their budding romance was interrupted by the difficulties of adult life. The Eckerd family received news that Donna, Sean's mother, was seriously ill. Sean's parents tried to consider the interests of everyone in the family when making a decision, but this completely changed their lives. Although Sean did not want to leave his hometown, friends, and Mary Jane, he was forced to accept his parents' decision. In 2005, the Eckerd family decided to leave the city where they had lived for many years and move to another state. They settled in Donna's mother's house in the small town of Spring Hill, Florida. This decision brought many positive changes to the whole family. Donna began to recover. Initially, Sean felt sad about leaving the band, familiar places, and friends, especially Mary Jane. However, with his optimistic personality, Sean quickly adapted to his new life. Gradually, he realized that life in Spring Hill was as full and meaningful as in the old place. Donna and Samuel found stable jobs at the Presbyterian church, where they spent most of their time. Donna worked at the nursery, taking care of children, while Samuel assisted at the chapel. Gradually, the two brothers regained their close relationship and made friends at their new school. Their lives seemed to be reborn in this new environment. Sean continued to join the school band, while Stanley attended a martial arts school near his new home. Despite his busy life, Sean could not stop thinking about Mary Jane. Every night after school, Sean would stay in his room and talk on the phone for hours. The conversations always ended with Sean promising to meet his girlfriend again. He promised to visit her as soon as his parents allowed it. While Sean kept his first love in his heart, his older brother Stanley tried to assert himself in the family. Stanley had a quiet and humble personality and seemed to receive little attention from his parents. In order to attract attention, he made many wrong decisions, which had serious consequences for the whole family. In May 2006, he informed his parents of his intention to drop out of school to pursue a martial arts career and open a martial arts club. However, due to the recklessness of youth, he joined a bad group, where he began to engage in petty fraud and experiment with illegal drugs. By 2007, bad relationships led to Stanley's arrest for theft and fraud. The news of his eldest son's wrongdoing shocked Donna, causing her to be hospitalized for a heart attack. Fortunately, the situation was quickly resolved with the help of a lawyer. This lawyer skillfully defended Stanley by pointing out the lack of direct evidence, helping him to be quickly released and receive only a suspended sentence. This incident left Stanley extremely scared, feeling guilty, hoping for sympathy and acceptance from his family. Meanwhile, after experiencing the terrifying events that happened to Stanley, Sean did not tell his parents about his decision. During the summer vacation, he worked as a waiter to save money. He then left a note for his mother, informing her that he was going to California to meet Mary Jane. The 2-day bus ride to Sean's lover seemed endless. The scenery changed, day turned to night, and Sean looked forward to meeting Mary Jane at the final destination. When the bus stopped, Sean eagerly ran to her, having seen her radiant face and long hair through the window. They spent the happiest days together, going on picnics like in high school. For the first time, Sean expressed his love to Mary, and she returned his feelings. After a walk, Sean and Mary Jane sat down on a bench. Suddenly, Sean felt dizzy, his vision went black, and he fainted. He was rushed to the hospital, his health rapidly deteriorating. Mary Jane contacted Sean's sister, Jennifer, who hurried to California. Doctors determined that the cause of Sean's rapid deterioration was a tick-borne disease. The disease developed suddenly and rapidly, causing many complications, including encephalitis. A grueling battle to save Sean's life began, with doctors working tirelessly for a long time to bring him back to health. After more than a month in a coma and 6 months of rehabilitation, Sean was saved. His recovery was arduous. It was surprising that a small tick bite during a summer walk could cause such a serious illness. Jennifer took her brother back to Florida for further treatment and long-term recovery. Mary Jane was forced to stay behind, only able to communicate with her boyfriend by phone. Despite the hardships and unexpected illness, these events brought the Eckerd family closer together. Donna did her best to help her beloved son Sean overcome his serious illness. She closely monitored his diet and exercise regimen. This devoted care helped Sean recover completely, but also caused Stanley to gradually harbor resentment and jealousy. After recovering, Sean continued his music studies and graduated in 2009. He dreamed of introducing Mary Jane, his favorite, to his family. However, this plan did not work out. Instead, Stanley introduced his younger brother to Samantha Rowe. Samantha, a native of Florida, quickly became friends with the two brothers. Stanley was fond of her and sympathetic towards her, while she was attracted to Sean's cheerful and outgoing personality. For a while, Stanley actively pursued Samantha, and she reciprocated his interest. They had a few romantic dates, ending in passionate kisses. Stanley was very happy, but Samantha, despite accepting his advances, could not stop thinking about Sean. Samantha wrote Sean a text message expressing her emotional and inviting him to go for a walk. Sean agreed, and the wife spent the evening walking along the river, talking about Stanley and Mary Jane. Sean had no intention of winning Samantha over because he already had a girlfriend. After being rejected, Samantha sent Stanley a text message, falsely claiming that Sean had met her and confessed that he liked her. Stanley was very angry. That night, he went up to Sean's room and they talked. At first, they spoke quietly, then argued loudly, and finally fell completely silent. The parents did not intervene in the quarrel between the two brothers because they were used to it. It was the mother who first discovered Sean missing when he did not answer the phone. The night before, Stanley had explained to his mother that Sean had left after an argument. After 2 days of searching, the police received an unusual call from Sean's sister, Jennifer. In the call, they heard only a woman's screams and a man's moans in the background. After being asked repeatedly to calm down, Jennifer finally spoke clearly to the police. She was still screaming for help and reported that her brother Stanley had killed Sean. She said that Stanley was in the house talking to his mother and that Stanley's father, Samuel, was lying next to Sean's body. She pleaded for immediate help. The police arrived at the crime scene and found a horrific sight in the backyard. Samuel was on his knees, his hands full as he tried to pull his son's body from the wet ground. He screamed and wiped the dirt off Sean. The once peaceful neighborhood, with its beautiful lawns where the two brothers often waved to neighbors, had now become the scene of a tragedy. The Eckerd family, who had happily raised 2 sons, now faced terrible grief. One son was dead, and the other was under arrest. Stanley was arrested on suspicion of murder. During his initial interview, he claimed he had no intention of killing his brother. In a fit of rage, Stanley had hit Sean in the head, causing him to fall and die. After realizing his brother was dead, Stanley White tied up the body and buried it in the backyard. During the investigation, Stanley said, "I buried him. After all, that's what you do with dead people." This statement sounded cold and emotionless, more like the words of a serial killer than those of a loving brother. To justify his actions, Stanley said that he did it for his mother, he wanting to protect her from the shock of hearing about Sean's death. Stanley planned to move and rebury his younger brother's body after their parents died. During the interrogation, Stanley displayed many different emotions. At times he cried, confessed, and showed remorse, claiming it was an accident. But at other times, he showed hatred and spoke harshly about Sean. He blamed his younger brother for all his troubles and admitted that Sean had won the competition for the love of their mother and Samantha. On the day of the incident, Stanley was charged with second-degree murder and held without bail. 2 days later, Dr. Barbara Wolfe performed an autopsy on Sean and submitted the forensic report to the court. The results showed that the victim had bruises under the skin and rope marks on his neck, indicating that he had been compressed, causing difficulty breathing. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head and asphyxiation. Assistant State Attorney Pete McGough investigated the case thoroughly. On February 25, 2011, the first hearing took place, with District Judge Stephen Rushing presiding. Stanley's parents, Donna and Samuel Eckerd, sat in the second row, crying as they watched their eldest son being led into the courtroom. On April 9, 2013, Stanley Eckerd's trial began in the Hernando Courthouse, with District Judge Anthony Taddy presiding. Attorney Alan Hunter represented the defendant, and Pete McGough was the prosecutor. The prosecutor tried to prove that Stanley had carefully planned the murder. The defense attorney argued that it was just a random fight that went horribly wrong. He also highlighted Stanley's attempts to conceal the crime as a sign of remorse. Stanley Eckerd is charged with first-degree murder and could face life in prison if convicted. The trial is scheduled to last 5 days, starting May 13. Judge Anthony Taddy will make the final decision. If convicted of second-degree murder, Stanley could still face life in prison. Stanley Eckerd has always maintained that he did not intend to kill his brother. 3 years ago, before burying his brother's body in their front yard, Eckerd rejected a prosecutor's offer to plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a maximum 20-year prison sentence. Eckerd remained calm as the clerk read the verdict. The brothers' parents, Samuel and Donna, wept silently as the jury left the courtroom. Samuel Eckerd's sobs turned to screams, and several relatives gathered around to comfort him. The jury agreed that Stanley did not intend to kill his 19-year-old brother, Sean, but they did not completely exonerate him. After about 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury of 9 women and 3 men found Stanley Eckerd guilty of second-degree murder. However, the Eckerd family still believes Stanley's account of the events that occurred in the early morning hours of June 19, 2010, and criticized the state attorney's office for bringing the case. Samuel Eckerd, Stanley's father, praised Chief Assistant Public Defender Alan Lanter for his good work in defending the case. The family questioned the appropriateness of the verdict and appealed, but their appeal was denied. Samuel expressed surprise that the jury reached its verdict so quickly but insisted that the family's belief remains unchanged. He also acknowledged one undeniable fact: after his younger brother died, Stanley dragged Sean's body out of his bedroom window and buried it in the backyard of their Spring Hill home. Samuel discovered Sean's body 2 days later. Assistant District Attorney Pete began his closing by showing the jury a photo of Sean's body rolled up in the dirt. Pete emphasized that this was not a cold case and pointed out that Stanley had changed his story several times when questioned about his younger brother's death. Pete went on to say that after Sean's funeral, Stanley forged text messages from Sean's phone, claiming he was in California with his girlfriend. Stanley also forged letters from Sean to Samantha, telling her not to contact him and to focus on Stanley instead. Finally, after hours of questioning, Stanley admitted that Sean had died in a fight in the bedroom. Stanley said he heard Sean's neck snap as they hit the floor. Stanley hid the body to protect his mother, who had heart problems, and planned to tell his father after she left for work. Pete concluded that Stanley caused the injuries that led to Sean's death, which constituted murder. He highlighted Stanley's statement to police about a dispute involving Samantha, as well as Stanley's conversation with his younger brother and a friend about revenge beefo. Sean died. During that conversation, the friend said Stanley mentioned that if he wanted to kill someone, he would hit them in the back of the head and bury them in the yard. However, this evidence was not strong enough to eliminate all reasonable doubt. Alan Lanter, defending, argued that the crime did not involve a deliberate act. Stanley was involved in his younger brother's death, but it was not murder, he said. Alan cited the medical examiner's testimony, saying that the blow to the head, combined with the swelling of his brain from encephalitis, could have caused his death. The pathologist also confirmed that hitting his head on the nightstand and the two fell could have been enough to cause Sean's death. Finally, Alan reminded the jury of Donna Eckerd's testimony, which stated that Sean had severe mood swings after suffering from encephalitis. In her testimony, Donna Eckerd even called Sean's death an accident. The jury could have found Stanley Eckerd guilty of third-degree murder or manslaughter, making this an excusable homicide case. Attorney Allen asked the jury not to let the gruesome images of Sean's body and Stanley's actions in burying it distract them from the real cause of his death. Stanley Eckerd did a terrible thing after Sean died, but he was not a murderer, Allen stressed. During the final trial, Eckerd's parents were devastated when Judge Anthony sentenced Samuel Eckerd to 50 years in prison without parole. They felt as if they had lost both their sons on the same day. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Madison Sparrow. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow was born on September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia, United States. She is the daughter of Heather Sparrow Murphy and Richard Prestige. In her family, Madison has older sisters Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, who was born in 1999 in Durango, Colorado, is Madison's older sister from her father's previous relationship. The family later settled in Newark, Newcastle County, Delaware. On October 5, 2010, her family welcomed a new member, baby Molly. Madison loves children and often takes on the role of the eldest in the family, which includes 8 cousins. She enjoys doing things that make people happy and frequently spends time playing with children or participating in entertainment shows such as magic shows. It is easy to catch Madison in a happy moment. Her laughter is contagious, showing her youthful and cheerful spirit. However, Madison can also be thoughtful and dreamy at times. Madison's father said that since she was a child, she has displayed her wisdom through careful observation and reflection before making decisions. Additionally, she is a very emotional person. Her warm hugs can uplift anyone's mood. For her friends and family, Madison is always a reliable confidant who genuinely cares about the happiness of those she loves. Madison is a curious girl who loves to explore new things, which led her to join the Girl Scouts, an organization for girls around the world. By the fall of 2012, all the Girl Scout troops were full, but thanks to her mother's efforts, Madison was able to join a group. Madison's mother led a new Brownies troop, and Madison joined at age 9. In recent years, Madison has become one of the top cookie sellers, winning numerous medals for her impressive sales. She has been involved with the Girl Scouts for nearly 10 years, during which time she has built a strong network of friendships. Currently, Madison volunteers with her younger SI. Stir Molly's troop, as she enjoys working with other young people and making a positive impact on their lives. Madison is a kind and generous girl who acts with commitment to her faith in God and service to her country. She is passionate about helping others and strictly adheres to the principles of the Girl Scouts. However, like any other young girl, Madison also enjoys spending time having fun and living life to the fullest. Even in her teenage years, she is always the life of the parties. She often plans parties with her friends, ranging from movie nights to full-blown beauty parties with manicures and pedicures. Madison frequently stays up all night, so it is not unusual for her to struggle to wake up by noon the next day. Before finishing elementary school, Madison met Annika Stalczynski, a girl her age who was born in Newark on July 9, 2003. They quickly became close friends and studied for exams together. Information about Annika's life is limited, but it is known that her parents are Robert Stalczynski and Robin Kars. In 2004, her family lived on Arona Mink Drive in Newark. After finishing elementary school, Annika and Madison went to middle school, where they made a new friend named Noah Sharp. Noah, a native of Newark, was born on August 23, 2001. Little is known about Noah's family and background, except that his mother, Nikki Sharp, has 2 other children, David and Brianna. The trio often went out for ice cream or spent time in the large green spaces around the city. When Noah and Madison met by chance, they felt an attraction to each other, and after just a few months, a teenage romance developed. At first, they were madly in love, but in early 2020, after more than a year together, Madison decided to break up with Noah without providing any reasons. They parted ways amicably and agreed to remain friends, but Noah was heartbroken because he still loved her deeply. During this time, Annika became Noah's trusted friend. They began to see each other more often and text almost every day. Although Noah's heart was still broken, he began dating another girl after a while. Despite his relationship with Annika, Noah kept in touch with Madison. He visited Madison on her 17th birthday, September 12, 2020, and brought her a gift. It seemed that Noah was still upset about the breakup. When Annika learned about her boyfriend's meeting with his ex-girlfriend, she felt jealous. She could not accept that he was still friends with his ex. Noah's sadness also turned to anger. He wanted to hurt Madison because he felt hurt. The following week, blinded by hatred and jealousy, Annika and Noah began planning to end Madison's life. They exchanged text messages, used FaceTime, and met in person to discuss weapons and how to dispose of the body after the crime. The messages they sent each other while planning the attack were horrifying and revealed their intention to cause Madison great pain. Annika made several suggestions, including using a knife to inflict serious damage to her heart. They also discussed the possibility of using a handgun or another blunt object. According to official documents, they quickly dismissed the idea of a handgun because it would make too much noise. Although Noah was not entirely confident, they decided to use a blunt object. During their discussions, they calculated the number of bricks they would need to hold Madison's body underwater if they decided to dump her there. When in doubt, one idea was to bury her since Noah could dig a hole and knew where to find a shovel. Eventually, they came up with what they believed was the perfect plan. Madison was an ice cream lover and also cherished Halloween. She eagerly awaited October each year to celebrate her favorite holiday. Throughout the month, Annika had been studying Madison's interests and taking advantage of them. On Friday, October 2nd, 2020, she called Madison to ask her out for ice cream and to spend a day together. Madison agreed because she hadn't seen her friend in a long time and also wanted to buy a gift for Molly, whose birthday was just 3 days away. That day, Madison wore black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, a blue sweatshirt that said New Jersey, and white ghost earrings. She rarely wore jewelry, especially earrings, but since she didn't have much time to prepare for Halloween, Madison decided to buy these earrings to match the holiday. At 2:44 p.m., she said goodbye to her mother, Heather, promised to see her later, and then left. Although nothing unusual happened at that time, the events that followed were extremely unsettling. That was the last time her mother saw her alive. Just hours later, Heather began receiving abusive text messages from Madison's phone number, along with information suggesting that Madison was supposed to be leaving the country. Heather thought it was a joke. She replied and wished Madison good luck in her endeavor, joking that she had forgotten to bring her passport, which was in the safe. However, Heather received no response. Even when she called her daughter, no one answered. Heather, who was hanging out with Molly and taking her to scout meetings and swimming lessons, was confused. The lack of response began to worry her. Heather decided to call Annika, knowing that they would meet later in the day. When Annika answered, she burst into tears and explained that Madison had insulted her and that she had dropped her off near a store. Annika then suggested contacting Noah, but he did not respond. Frustrated, Heather asked Annika to contact Noah again. The three of them chatted but did not get any information. Frustrated, Heather decided to go home. On the way home, Heather received several messages from her daughter's friends, who had also received strange messages and wanted to know what was going on. When she got home and did not search for any clues, Heather found no signs that her daughter had run away. Even the money she had received for her birthday, her clothes, and her Redick cards were in her room. These messages were strange and nonsensical. Madison had no reason to run away, especially without a bag containing her clothes and money. When Madison did not return home at around 8:30 p.m., Heather contacted 911 and reported her daughter missing. Despite repeated attempts to reach out to people, all her efforts were in vain. After being informed of the situation, Heather's parents traveled from another city to support their daughter. Furthermore, she notified Madison's father, with whom she had divorced, who now lived in Colorado. He quickly shared the information on social media, calling for help in finding his daughter. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, the search for Madison, 17, who was reported missing, continued. Delaware State Police issued a yellow alert to activate all necessary procedures to search for missing persons. Over the course of 2 days, police search teams, family and friends searched farms near the University of Delaware, where Madison was last seen. The media also disseminated information about the search, asking people to come forward with any details. Delaware State Police have begun questioning Madison's friends, and evidence points to her ex-boyfriend as a suspect. According to information, the girl went to the woods in Newark behind the elementary school, where she was also seen with Noah on the day she went missing. Detectives then detained and questioned him for nearly 9 hours from October 4th to 5th, but he claimed he had no idea what had happened. He eventually confessed to his actions and revealed that Annika was an accomplice. He explained that Annika hated Madison because she was jealous of their relationship. He also shared his deep feelings about breaking up with her. According to Noah's testimony, he drove Madison to the woods behind the elementary school, then hid behind the bushes with an aluminum baseball bat. As Madison happily walked along the trail, he suddenly emerged from his hiding place and hit Madison twice in the head. Noah admitted to putting all his strength into the second blow, adding that it was then that he became enraged after months of losing control over the girl who had broken his heart. Unable to control himself, he continued to strike her body multiple times. After the attack, the two used Annika's car to transport her body to a location near the intersection of I-95 and the Delaware state line, about 15 minutes away from the scene and near a warehouse. Once there, they attempted to drown the body in the river. Unsuccessful, they opted to bury it in a shallow grave they dug in the same location. Armed with detailed information from the suspect, investigators carefully searched the designated area. There, they discovered an aluminum baseball bat used as a weapon, with traces of blood. The crime scene also revealed the victim's clothing, with some items showing evidence of having been burned. The suspect then led law enforcement to a large plot of land near the intersection of I-95 and the Delaware state line, where he and his accomplice had secretly buried the body. On Monday, October 5, 2020, Corporal Heather Piper announced the discovery of Madison's body. The news sent shockwaves through the victim's family, friends, and community. Several days later, on Saturday, October 9th, hundreds gathered at the high school football field to remember and honor Madison. An autopsy revealed that Madison died from blunt force trauma to the head. Experts also found the DNA of Noah and Annika on physical evidence collected at the scene and where the bodies were found. Noah faces charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. He has been placed in a correctional facility on a $1 million bail. More than a month after the tragic event and after processing the necessary evidence, Annika, 17, was also arrested. She was indicted by a Newcastle County grand jury on charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. Meanwhile, Madison's family has been struggling. Heather has repeatedly stated that the exact cause of her daughter's death may never be known. Although Noah admitted his guilt to the police, he did not plead guilty in his formal court filing. This has led to speculation that his defense attorney may argue that he was mentally unstable. In some cases, attorneys often attempt to defend their clients by referring to their mental health status. Similarly, during a preliminary hearing, Noah's attorney stated that Noah was being treated for schizophrenia and was under the care of a psychiatrist at the time of the murder. Noah's attorney confirmed that he had been injured in Chester County, Pennsylvania, about 3 weeks before the murder. The attorney explained that Noah had suffered memory loss and other problems as a result of the head injury. However, the attorney did not provide specific information about the cause and severity of the injury. In May 2021, Annika pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree conspiracy. Her attorneys negotiated with prosecutors, and Annika agreed to testify against Noah regarding his intention to kill Madison. Several people close to the victim had reported to the police about alter ego Noah's alleged alter ego. However, prosecutors argued that Noah himself had disseminated this information, intending to use it at trial later as part of his plan to kill Madison. After 2 years of waiting, the defendant's trial began on October 20, 2022, in Newcastle County. During the proceedings, approximately 30 witnesses were called, primarily by Deputy Attorney General Matt Foley and an assistant prosecutor. The courtroom played hours of video recordings of Noah's interviews with state police detectives. Viewers heard Noah's changing story until he finally confessed. The defense tried to challenge this evidence, arguing that the CE had interrogated their client for too long. Attorney Monica Jerome noted that the detectives interfered with the interrogation, directing Noah to say what they wanted and forcing him to say it. However, most people viewed this as a last-ditch effort to justify the murderer in any way possible. The prosecution presented text messages exchanged between Noah and Annika, which they claimed showed that the two had planned the crime. Faced with this evidence, the defense attempted to convince the court that someone else had control of the suspect's device and that he was not the one who contacted Annika. However, the testimonies of Noah's mother and brother contradicted each other several times when they were called to testify. Nikia stated that her son came home on the evening of October 2nd without being wet. Meanwhile, David said that his brother was wet and looked like he had just come out of a swamp. Nikia reported that when her son arrived home, Annika came in and seemed normal. David, on the other hand, claimed that Annika came in angry and slammed the door. Prosecutor Matt Froley asked Nikia if she had discussed the evidence against Noah with him, to which she replied no. However, prosecutors obtained a recording of a phone call that took place a month before the trial, in which the defendant and his mother discussed surveillance camera footage at the elementary school. During that conversation, Noah informed his mother that his face was not visible in the video showing him and Annika near the school an hour before Madison was murdered. His mother reacted with relief at this news. However, the video showed an African-American man of similar height and build to Noah, holding a baseball bat while walking into the woods with a girl. The defense questioned the defendant's relatives about the 2 injuries he allegedly sustained. The first was a head injury on September 13, 2020. The second was another unconfirmed injury he suffered after falling off his bike, just hours before his police interview on October 4th. Noah's lawyers argued that these injuries could have caused dissociative amnesia, attempting to justify the statements he made to the police. The court considered the arguments of both the prosecution and the defense regarding the victim's injuries. Annika, the accused, gave a 3-hour testimony that supported the prosecution's arguments. During her testimony, she calmly explained that Noah had convinced her that Madison had talked badly about her behind her back. However, Madison's family and friends insisted that she had never spoken ill of her friends. After 8 days of trial and more than 250 pieces of evidence presented by the prosecutors, the jury took just 3 hours to reach its final verdict. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the jury's verdict was announced, neither Noah nor his mother showed any emotion, Noah simply reneged and smiled at his mother. The Madison family cried tears of relief before leaving the courtroom. In Annika's case, when she was convicted, prosecutors stated that under Delaware law, she would be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, since she was a juvenile at the time of the crime. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Alex Murdaugh. Richard Alexander, Alex Murdaugh, born May 27, 1968, is a member of a prominent and well-connected South Carolina legal family. The Murdaugh family has dominated the region's legal system for more than 100 years, with 3 consecutive generations serving as district attorneys of the 14th Judicial District from 1920 to 2006. However, that dynasty has come to an abrupt end for Alex. The Murdaugh family has been building the foundation for their success for decades. Specifically, when Alex's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh Sr., founded the law firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Loof, and Dietrich, PMPD, they became an influential family in the area. Their strong presence led to the Hampton area being referred to as Murdaugh County. Alex sought to follow in his family's footsteps and pursued a law degree at the University of North Carolina. While in college, he met and married High's wife, Margaret "Maggie" Brandstetter, in 1993. They began seeing each other in 1991 and were married on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex, a personal injury attorney who works at the family firm PMPD, seeks to continue the family legacy. Unlike previous generations of Murdaughs, however, Alex abused the power and influence of the family business to cover up financial crimes, theft, and even suspected murder. His nefarious dealings lasted for more than a decade until his youngest son, Paul, died in a boating accident. Paul's boating accident was the latest in a string of suspicious deaths linked to the Murdaugh family. Many believe that these deaths were not actual accidents but part of a larger cover-up. Given the history and resources of the Murdaugh family, this theory seems plausible, especially considering how they handled Mallory Beach's death. Paul Murdaugh sailed his family boat to a party on Pucas Island on February 23, 2019. Having just graduated from high school, Paul and his girlfriend Morgan Dowdy, along with Anthony Cook and Mallory Beach, wanted to have a party in a night of unsupervised fun. They planned to start the night with a house party and oyster roast on the island. However, parties can't start without alcohol, so Paul bought some beer and hard liquor using his brother's ID. They left the Murdaugh River house at 7 p.m. By midnight, they were ready to continue their fun, so Paul decided to steer the boat to downtown Beaufort. There, he and Connor, a teenager, also joined the boat party, had 2 rounds of drinks around 1 a.m. On the way back to the boat, Paul and Connor were caught on a surveillance camera. At this point, Paul had been drinking heavily, and according to other passengers, he began to act strangely around 1:15 a.m. As they sailed, the situation became more complicated. The group started to disagree with Paul as he steered the boat in a disoriented manner and acted as if he were drunk. Audrey recalled that Anthony asked Paul to take him to a nearby rock to get off, but Paul refused. Morgan later commented that Paul took his hands off the wheel several times to argue with her, which made Mallory very nervous. GPS data from the boat's Garmin device indicated a period of acceleration. Paul, however, denied pushing the boat forward, but he was at the wheel at 2:20 a.m. when the boat hit the bridge, throwing Mallory into the water. The other teens were also in danger. Connor suffered a broken jaw and Morgan sustained a serious hand injury. Connor called 911 and help arrived immediately. When Deputy Beaufort arrived, the teens were in a state of chaos. The first thing he noticed was that Anthony was in distress. He reported that when he saw Paul smiling, Anthony actually tried to run past him to get to Paul. Police reported finding blood in the main cabin of the boat and a large crack in the hull from the collision. All of the teens were intoxicated and were taken to the hospital for treatment, except for Anthony. Everyone agreed to treatment except Paul, who was highly agitated and had a blood alcohol level of 0.243, well above the legal limit. Paul's father, Alex, was present that night, going from room to room trying to calm everyone down and control the situation. After 8 days of searching, Mallory's body was finally found. The autopsy revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to the head and subsequent drowning. Several witnesses, including Paul's girlfriend Morgan, testified that Paul was speeding in the boat that night. However, Paul was neither arrested nor charged. This led to speculation that Alex may have intervened in the legal process to help his son escape punishment. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was sued for wrongful death. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, knew her son was intoxicated while the group was boating. Additionally, they claimed that his brother Buster provided the paperwork necessary for the group to purchase alcohol. It was not until April 18, 2019, on Mallory's 20th birthday, that Paul was charged with 3 felony counts of operating a boat while intoxicated, resulting in her death and the serious injury of 2 other passengers. Paul pleaded not guilty and was released on $50,000 bail. Unfortunately, Paul's trial date never arrived. He died before the case could proceed. Another death that appears to be linked to the Murdaugh family is that of Stephen Smith, an openly gay teenager whose body was found on July 8, 2015, lying in the middle of a road in Hampton County, South Carolina. The cause of death for the victim was severe head trauma. The incident was initially ruled a hit-and-run accident, and no suspects were arrested. However, the victim's mother believes her son was murdered in a hate crime. Stephen had been classmates with Buster Murdaugh in high school. In addition to their friendship, there were rumors that the two had been romantically involved. Some have suggested Buster was involved in Stephen's death and that the story of him running away after the accident was a lie. On March 22, 2023, the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement reopened the case, confirming that his death was indeed a homicide, although no suspects have been named. Another case involves the Murdaugh family. Gloria was the longtime housekeeper for Alex's family. On February 2, 2018, she suffered a serious head injury after falling down the stairs at the Moselle mansion. She later died on February 26, 2018, from complications related to the accident. Alex claimed that his dogs greeted Gloria at the top of the stairs, causing her to trip and fall backward, leading to the accident. It is unclear why no autopsy was performed to confirm Alex's version of events. Gloria's death certificate listed the cause of death as natural causes. Gloria's sons sued for their mother's untimely death in 2018 and were awarded a $1.4 million insurance settlement in 2020. However, the money and reached them. Alex allegedly plotted to collect the insurance money, approached Gloria's sons, and encouraged them to sue him, even introducing them to an attorney named Corey Fleming. Corey Fleming was a longtime friend and associate of one of Alex's sons. They conspired to defraud and steal the Gloria family's insurance money. They wired the insurance money into Alex's bank account without notifying the Gloria family that they had received the money. Gloria's sons then filed a new civil lawsuit on September 15, 2021, against Alex. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Gloria's death. Investigators are trying to determine whether there is any criminal liability in her death. Based on a request from the Hampton County coroner, they found that Gloria's cause of death was not due to natural causes. After Gloria's family gave permission, authorities conducted an autopsy to investigate further. In late September 2021, Alex faced multiple charges related to financial misconduct and embezzlement. Before the Gloria family sued, Alex had been involved in fraud and embezzlement for nearly a decade. Alex was accused of participating in a money laundering and painkiller abuse scheme that lasted from October 2013 to September 2021, along with his distant cousin and co-defendant, Curtis Smith. On September 4, 2021, Alex and Curtis conspired to commit murder. Alex provided Curtis with a gun and instructed him to shoot Alex himself, intending for Buster, Alex's only surviving son, to collect Alex's life insurance policy after his death. Curtis went to the location Alex had prepared, where Alex pretended that his tire was flat, and Curtis shot him as instructed. However, the bullet only caused minor injuries to Alex, who called 911 himself. When local law enforcement inspected the scene, they recognized signs of foul play but were unable to prove it. A few days later, Alex admitted that he had conspired with Curtis and staged the shooting. His lawyer informed him that he was mentally unstable and that malicious elements were taking advantage of the situation. They claimed that Alex wanted to commit suicide so that Buster could collect a $10 million life insurance policy. Alex turned himself in when he learned a warrant had been issued for his arrest and was charged with fraud and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. He filed a police report just 2 days after the incident. Alex announced that he would resign from his family law firm and enter rehab for treatment. After his release, he was quoted as saying that he had made many decisions that he regretted. In September 2021, the South Carolina Supreme Court indefinitely suspended Alex's law license. Further investigation into Alex's life revealed that he had committed several financial crimes, including tax evasion, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds from clients and the law firm where he worked. Alex was released from rehab on October 14, 2021, and was later arrested. He was charged with 2 felony counts of fraud. The arrest was based on an investigation into the misappropriation of investment funds related to the unnatural death of Gloria. This time, Alex was denied bail. This was just the beginning of Alex's legal troubles. On November 18, 2021, he was indicted on 27 counts of financial fraud, including allegedly stealing money from clients, other lawyers, and the family of his deceased housekeeper. On December 9, 2021, an additional 21 charges were filed against Alex, bringing the total to 48. The charges include 1 count of counterfeiting, 4 counts of money laundering, 7 counts of computer crime, and 9 counts of breach of trust with intent to commit fraud, among others. It is estimated that Alex stole more than $6.2 million from his victims. The investigation into Alex's business dealings has been ongoing, with new charges being filed against him. By June 2022, the total number of charges against him had reached 81. On July 13, 2022, when Alex was officially disbarred, he faced a total of 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. Mallory Beach's mother, whose daughter was a 19-year-old victim, was one of several people who filed lawsuits related to the estate of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh. The prominent attorney's alleged financial misconduct has raised questions about his character and conduct. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, has decided to review what they know and have accepted as the truth about the double murder and further investigate the financial crimes against Alex. Investigators realized that this was a troubled marriage. Alex and Maggie were experiencing marital difficulties. Maggie was living separately at the family home on Edisto Island, which is a little over an hour's drive from the Moselle estate. Maggie's sister, Marion Branstetter, told police that Maggie had no plans to see her husband on the night of the murder. Alex contacted Maggie on that fateful day, asking her to come to the family hunting lodge. He wanted her to accompany him to visit his father, who was dying and could pass away at any moment. Initially, she did not want to go but texted a friend, saying that her husband's behavior was suspicious and that he might be planning something. She suggested they meet at the hospital instead of following her husband. Eventually, she agreed to drive to the Moselle estate before going to the hospital to visit her ailing father-in-law. However, she was murdered before she had a chance to see him. Maggie and her youngest son were murdered at the Murdaugh family's 1,700-acre farm in Moselle, which included a house, a doghouse, a cabin, and wetlands. Maggie and Paul were shot multiple times near the doghouse. Paul was shot twice with a shotgun, while Maggie was shot 5 times with a different weapon, which ballistics analysis showed was a .300 caliber round from an AR-style rifle. Alex stated that he had taken a long nap that day before visiting his dad, who suffered from dementia. He claimed he was gone for about 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and when he returned, he found his wife and youngest son dead on the floor near the doghouse. Law enforcement reviewed Alex's schedule that night, and he admitted that he had taken a nap on the couch before leaving for his dad. In this case, police investigated the motive behind prominent attorney Alex's murder of his family. Investigators found a key clue. Weeks before the killings, a grand jury subpoenaed Alex's finances for an probe related to his son Paul's 2019 fatal boating accident. This may have been the primary motive. Alex is worried that all his financial wrongdoing will be exposed following a hearing scheduled for June 10, 2021. Furthermore, his law firm has uncovered his misuse of company funds. Gene Singer, the company's chief financial officer at the time, confronted Alex about the missing money on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities say the financial pressure used Alex to panic and fear that his world was falling apart. Once a prominent lawyer in South Carolina, Alex devised a bold plan to hide his financial crimes. However, these acts are gradually becoming public and drawing sympathy away from him. On July 14, 2022, 13 months after the shooting that killed his wife and son, Alex was charged with their murders. His trial commenced with charges of murder and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. The prosecution claimed that Alex used both a handgun and an AR rifle to shoot and kill his wife and son at close range. The murder weapons were never found. Alex's defense team argued that the shootings were carried out by two different shooters based on the weapons used. An expert witness for the defense stated that the height of the shooters could have ranged between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 4 inches, while Alex stands at 6 feet 4 inches tall, which disqualified him as a suspect. Prosecutors pointed to the gunshot evidence as indicating Alex's involvement. However, the expert witness, when questioned, acknowledged that other factors besides height could have influenced the trajectory of the bullets. The ballistics investigation determined that Maggie was shot with .300 blackout rounds from an AR-style rifle. Investigators found a box of these bullets on the Murdaugh family property. The state's attorney argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid responsibility for his financial crimes. However, Alex's attorney disputed this theory, claiming that there was no reason for Alex to divert the financial investigation away from himself and instead put himself at the center of a murder investigation. During the trial, evidence emerged suggesting that Alex was not the one who directly committed the murders that the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement, SLED, was investigating. Alex's attorney, Dick Harputlian, argued that he had an alibi for the night of the murders and had an motive to kill Maggie and their youngest son, Paul. He portrayed Alex and Maggie's marriage as one of everlasting love. However, prosecutors presented two videos of Alex from the night of the murders, taken hours apart. One was from Paul's Snapchat, and the other was from a law enforcement officer's body camera at the scene of the crime. The Snapchat footage was taken about an hour before the murders. When compared to what Alex was wearing after the incident, there was a clear discrepancy in clothing. In the Snapchat video, Alex was dressed in a blue shirt, which was different from the one he wore that was captured on the police body camera. Investigators concluded that they did not find the blue shirt they were looking for. Prosecutors believe Alex attempted to influence a key witness's testimony by asking if she remembered the shirt he was wearing the night of the incident. Alex's cell phone records showed that he was only at his mother's house for about 15 to 20 minutes. Alex's hers caretaker also confirmed this, claiming that he only stayed for about 15 to 20 minutes before leaving. However, Alex claimed that he stayed for at least 45 minutes, and possibly as long as an hour and a half. When asked how long he stayed with his mother, Alex responded, about 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes at most. The most important piece of evidence was found on Paul's phone, which was recovered at the scene. It included a video that Paul had recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before investigators believe the murder occurred. The video was recorded in a dog kennel and featured the audio of 3 separate voices. Family and friends identified the voices as those of Paul, Maggie, and Alex. This placed Alex in the vicinity of the murders, although he claimed he was never in the doghouse that night. During the 5th week of the trial, Alex took the stand and insisted that he never intended to harm his wife and son. He admitted that he had lied about his alibi, claiming that his was because he was addicted to opiates and prone to paranoia at the time. Prosecutors argued that after Alex killed his wife and son, he used his wife's phone to make several calls and send text messages to construct his alibi. Cell phone records also showed that Alex and his wife's phones locked within seconds of each other, which was presented to the jury as additional evidence. Based on data from Alex's cell phone, prosecutors noted that he engaged in a number of unusual activities during the timeframe of the murders. They claimed he attempted to conceal or destroy evidence that could link him to the case. However, Alex's attorneys countered this claim by pointing out that Alex's phone activity did not align with his wife's actions, arguing that it was impossible to conclude that he took his wife's phone after the shooting. Ultimately, the video recorded at the dog kennel provided decisive evidence that influenced the case outcome. The jury returned its verdict after 3 hours of deliberation on March 2, 2023. They found Alex guilty on all counts and sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. In addition, the jury also convicted him of 2 counts of using a weapon in a violent crime, which resulted in an additional 5 years in prison. Alex pleaded guilty to 22 counts of financial crimes as part of a deal but maintained his innocence regarding the murders of his wife and son. On March 9, 2023, he filed an appeal of his double murder conviction. During the trial, Alex's attorney filed a motion for a new trial after discovering evidence of jury tampering by Rebecca Hill, a Culleton County Court clerk. Rebecca allegedly advised the jury not to believe Alex's testimony and the other evidence presented by the defense. She also allegedly pressured the jury to quickly return a guilty verdict and misrepresented key information to the judge. A hearing will be held for Alex's attorneys to present evidence and witnesses to support her claims. However, no judge has yet been selected to preside over the hearing. With Alex's appeal, more than 100 drug and financial crime charges, and multiple lawsuits pending, we can expect that more new information about Alex will be revealed in the future. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. Carroll, Ohio, is home to several families, including the Richardson family. This family consists of Kim and Scott Richardson, who are very involved in their children's lives. Their son, Jackson, loves playing football, while their daughter, Brooke Skylar, commonly known as Skylar, is a cheerleader. Skylar has struggled with an eating disorder since she was very young. Her mother, Kim, first noticed the problem when Skylar was in 6th grade at the age of 12. Skylar's hyperfocus on food and exercise became very apparent when she refused to buy gum because it had more than 5 calories. As a cheerleader, Skylar needs to be light and easy to throw. The pressure to maintain a certain weight makes her battle with weight loss even more difficult. She is constantly preoccupied with her body image and is afraid of gaining weight. Skylar's struggle with her weight and body image began during cheerleading practice. In an effort to maintain her weight, she started vomiting after meals. However, this behavior only worsened her problems once practice ended. After that, Skylar's struggle with her weight became more intense. She may experience periods of overeating in a short time, consuming more than her body needs. This is often accompanied by periods of starvation, during which Skylar restricts her food intake or follows a strict diet. Skylar's parents noticed changes in her behavior and became concerned about her health. They tried to express these concerns to her, but whenever the subject was brought up, Skylar became quiet. She did not want to talk about it and always refused any attempts to address her weight changes. Skylar's parents sought help from various professionals, including doctors and therapists, hoping that these interventions would help their daughter reduce her anxiety. After a clinical evaluation, Skylar was diagnosed with body dysmorphic disorder. This psychological condition causes individuals to focus excessively on a perceived flaw in their appearance, leading to impairment in daily functioning and distress. In July 2016, during her senior year of high school, Skylar began dating a friend's cousin. However, the relationship did not last, and by January 2017, Skylar had a new boyfriend, a high school student named Brandon. Skylar was in a good mood and appeared to have gained weight. Her parents, Kim and Scott, believed that their daughter's eating disorder had improved. They noticed that she looked healthy and genuinely happy. In February, Skylar chose a tight-fitting evening gown that required a tie. In mid-March, she went on vacation with her family. During the trip, she wore a two-piece swimsuit, and her mother commented that she looked great. Kim believed that her daughter and Brandon were having sex, so she wanted Skylar to start taking birth control pills. She thought this would protect her daughter's health and prevent the risk of an unwanted pregnancy. In mid-April 2017, Skylar went to her mother's gynecologist to get a prescription for birth control pills while her mother, Kim, waited outside the clinic. After seeing the doctor, Skylar left the clinic with tears in her eyes. Kim immediately asked her daughter why she was so sad, and Skylar replied that it was a painful experience for her. Kim believed her daughter was telling the truth, unaware of the real reason behind the tears. During Skylar's visit to her OB/GYN, the doctor informed her that she was about 8 months pregnant. Skylar asked the doctor not to reveal this information to anyone, as she was not ready to share the news with her family. On May 5th, 9 days later, Skylar and her boyfriend Brandon went to prom. Even though Skylar was in the final stages of her pregnancy, she still managed to fit into her prom dress. 2 weeks after Skylar attended the prom, on July 14, 2017, police officers arrived at her home to meet with her parents, Kim and Scott. The officers stated that they needed to talk to Skylar about an incident she may have witnessed and assured her that nothing was wrong. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, where they wanted to question her about an emergency call the police had received from a fertility clinic. Specifically, the doctor had reported that a patient had just given birth and may have buried the baby in the yard. After receiving this notice, the police immediately arrested Skylar and took her to a room for questioning. They did not allow her father to participate in the questioning. Before the questioning began, the police explained her rights to her. The investigator then started asking questions about the phone call from the doctor's office. The caller informed the police that on April 26th, a doctor had examined Skylar and concluded that she was pregnant. However, Skylar later revealed to the doctor that the baby was dead and that she had buried the baby in her backyard. During her interview with the police, Skylar recounted a tragic event from her past. On May 7, 2017, she said that she had given birth to a baby girl in the bathroom, but the baby was not breathing and had no heartbeat. Therefore, she decided to bury the baby alone and did not tell anyone about the incident. To do this, Skylar quietly went downstairs, took a garden shovel, and dug a shallow grave in her backyard, where she buried the baby. She then left a vase with flowers at the burial site to mark and remember her deceased child. During a conversation with her parents, Skylar announced that she had chosen the name Annabelle for the baby and revealed that the baby's father was the cousin of a close friend she had dated briefly before meeting Brandon. Crime scene investigators went to the Richardson home to search for the child's remains. They searched the backyard by pulling weeds and sweeping the ground. The police carried out this process meticulously and carefully, removing any debris that might hinder their investigation. After overcoming the difficulties caused by the overgrown vegetation, they were able to collect a significant amount of evidence. After removing the weeds and cleaning the area, the police found several human bones, including skull fragments. These bones were carefully collected and placed in small body bags to preserve the evidence. Investigators ensured that the bones were kept intact. Later, one investigator noted that the bones had a smell, while another had difficulty determining whether they were rocks or human bones due to their small size. At the same time, the coroner confirmed the discovery of hair and small fingernails, but no organs or items that could help identify. After more than 5 hours of questioning, Skylar and her parents were allowed to return home. However, just 6 days after the incident, Skylar was contacted by the police and told that she needed to come to the police station again. To reassure her father, Scott, the police assured her that she would not face any legal action. During Skylar's next meeting with the police, they informed her that they had received new information from the medical examiner's office. This information revealed the discrepancy between Skylar's original story and what the police had discovered. Specifically, the medical examiner had found that the baby's bones showed signs of being burned, based on an analysis of the remains. Skylar was confused by the news of the baby being burned. She claimed that she did not set the fire and denied harming her child. However, the police still wanted Skylar to admit that she had killed her daughter and then burned the body to hide the evidence. During the investigation, the police suggested that Skylar may have wanted to cremate the baby so that the ashes would not be scattered. However, this suggestion only made Skylar more confused, and she still insisted that she did not burn the baby. Skylar suddenly changed her story to the police, saying that she had a lighter and may have used it to try to burn the baby's remains. She also suggested that the baby may have been born alive and had been crying, even making gurgling or small noises at one point. Additionally, Skylar admitted that she had held the newborn too tightly, which may have led to the baby's death. During an hour-long interrogation, the police gathered enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. Law enforcement suspected that Skylar had caused the child's death by suffocation. After presenting her case to a grand jury, she was charged with aggravated murder, a crime that carries a life sentence in Ohio. Skylar pleaded not guilty to other charges, including involuntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and child abuse. She spent several days in jail until her family was able to post $50,000 bail to secure her temporary release. Following her child's death, Skylar became the focus of media attention and was subjected to intense public scrutiny. This severely affected her family's daily life. They felt unsafe and were forced to retreat into their home to seek peace and quiet. The threats had disastrous consequences, making it even harder for them to step outside. People who saw them often took pictures, which added to their stress and put enormous pressure on them. The constant public scrutiny became unbearable and affected almost every aspect of their daily lives. Although Skylar's lawyer believes that she made a false confession and that her newborn baby's death was not intentional, the prosecution has not changed its position. Despite new evidence that contradicts their initial assessment, they continue to pursue the case. A key piece of evidence that the prosecution initially presented was the results of a medical expert's examination, which stated that the child's remains had been burned. However, After a thorough examination and additional information, the expert retracted his initial assessment. Following a detailed physical examination of the child, the expert concluded that there was no evidence of burning. The prosecution's approach remained unchanged despite the new information. They continued to focus on Skylar's confession that she had tried to burn the remains, but this contradicted the evidence and raised questions about whether their case was actually convincing. This shows that the state was convicting despite flaws in the evidence. Skylar's lawyers fought hard at trial to defend her against the charges. Thanks to the efforts of her family, Skylar was able to raise the $50,000 bail she needed to be released. However, her bail was conditional on her wearing an electronic monitoring bracelet that would track her whereabouts. Skylar has been largely confined to her home and has had limited public exposure. She feels isolated and prefers to spend most of her time with her family dogs. Over the past 12 months, Skylar's life has undergone major changes as her plans to attend the University of Cincinnati have been put on hold while she awaits trial for her child's murder. The charges were so serious that Skylar's attorney filed a motion to change the venue, but the court denied it. As a result, Skylar was forced to continue attending the trial in the original jurisdiction as planned. The stress and pressure of the trial weighed heavily on her life. Moreover, Skylar had to deal with the psychological and emotional trauma caused by the charges, along with social isolation. Spending time with her dogs brought her comfort and a sense of solace. They became her trusted companions and main support during the time she awaited the trial. At the same time, her family remained by her side, supporting and encouraging her through this difficult period. They expressed their belief in her innocence and hoped that the truth would soon be revealed. Despite the difficult challenges, Skylar persisted in fighting for her freedom. In July 2019, the state made a surprise offer to Skylar's defense attorney. Skylar would plead guilty to the remaining charges and serve a 15-year prison sentence. In exchange, the state would withdraw the felony murder charge. Skylar's parents were uncertain about the decision and debated whether she should accept the deal. After careful consideration, Skylar decided to decline the offer. Her parents were deeply troubled by her decision and wondered if their daughter had made the right choice. However, they understood that it was ultimately Skylar's choice, and they had to respect it. On September 3, 2019, Skylar went to trial for the murder of her newborn daughter. During the trial, the state presented preliminary evidence, including a series of text messages that Skylar had sent to her mother. In these messages, she expressed her happiness after giving birth. She also shared that she was very pleased because her belly had returned to its normal size, stating that she would not allow it to return to how it was before. Notably, this message was sent just hours after she gave birth. Skylar texted her mother, "I am really speechless because I am so happy. My belly is back." On the second day of the trial, the prosecution presented new information about Skylar. They stated that Skylar sent several text messages to her mother and boyfriend less than a day after she killed her baby. These messages indicated that Skylar seemed very happy about her baby's death. The prosecution argued that these messages were critical evidence suggesting Skylar's involvement in the baby's death. In one message, Skylar wrote to her mother that she was excited because dinner was coming up and she could wear a cute outfit. She mentioned that her belly had just returned to normal and wanted to take advantage of this time to make things great. However, this text message could be interpreted as an attempt to mask her feelings of guilt, while simultaneously being excited about no longer being pregnant. The state argued that Skylar's use of the word excited suggested she was genuinely happy that her baby had died. They also presented evidence of a text message that Skylar sent to her boyfriend in which she stated that although the night before had been the worst, she felt much lighter and happier the next morning. According to the state, This text message implies that Skylar felt unburdened by the death of her baby. The state's position is that Skylar did not want to have the baby. They acknowledged that they could not provide concrete evidence that the baby was born alive. However, they pointed out that Skylar had admitted in her police interview that she heard the baby gurgling and crying. The state alleged that Skylar had searched the internet for information about abortion. It was also alleged that Skylar's mother, Kim, warned her that she would lose everything if she became pregnant. This warning instilled great fear in Skylar, causing her to try to keep her pregnancy a secret. When she could no longer hide her condition, she decided to take drastic measures. On the third day of Skylar's trial, the doctor who performed the autopsy on the baby testified. The autopsy revealed that the baby's cause of death was homicide. However, the doctor could not determine when the fractures in the baby's skull occurred, whether they happened before or after the baby died. In forming his opinion regarding the cause of the fractures, the doctor relied on Skylar's statements during the police interview. Skylar's defense attorney challenged the doctor's testimony, arguing that the doctor may have been biased in confirming the information. According to the attorney, the doctor had already formed an opinion and did not want to change it. During questioning, the doctor admitted that she had never examined the remains of the deceased child under a microscope. The defense attorney then asked the doctor if she had consulted with obstetricians. The doctor answered no. The attorney also asked if the doctor had seen photographs of the burial site or the backyard of Skylar's home. Again, the doctor replied no. Another doctor, specializing in fetal medicine, testified during the afternoon session of Skylar's trial, primarily when questioned by the prosecution. He stated that he suspected Skylar's baby was stillborn and added that she had only performed one screening. Knowing that the margin of error for fundal height measurements during the third trimester of pregnancy is 60%, he believed that Skylar could be carrying a healthy baby. He thought this was possible because Skylar had felt the baby move, and a dead baby would not normally move. He also questioned the report from the doctor who had provided information to the defense. The doctor had stated that Skylar's baby would likely have developmental problems. During cross-examination by the defense attorney, he asked the doctor if the prosecution had paid him. The doctor responded that he was paid $5,000 a day because that was the cost the hospital had to pay for another doctor when they were short-staffed. As the prosecution presented their case against Skylar, more shocking and heartbreaking evidence was introduced in court. The evidence that had the strongest impact on Skylar was the images of the deceased child's remains shown on the television screen. These images left a deep and lasting impression on Skylar, as was evident in her reaction during the trial. When the images of her child's remains appeared on the screen, Skylar initially tried not to look at them. Her remarkably calm demeanor at that moment was a stark contrast to the day before when she had been visibly shaken for a moment before the judge began the jury selection process. When Skylar's defense attorneys presented their case, they argued that her life had been flawed and challenging even before she was charged with murder. They argued that much prosecution evidence presented a partial truth, with some documents was taken out. Skylar's defense attorney argued that her frequent texting was not evidence that she killed her daughter. Instead, the attorney wanted to highlight Skylar's mental health struggles, particularly an eating disorder that she had been battling since she was 12. This was supported by several pieces of evidence, including Skylar seeing a psychologist and nutritionist regularly for treatment of her eating disorder. To support their case, they presented the jury with photos of Skylar's changing appearance and weight over time. The photos included images of her looking very thin, as well as photos showing her looking slightly heavier. Her attorney stated that Skylar held the baby for hours while she bled on the bathroom floor. Despite her critical condition, Skylar remained committed to providing comfort and care for her baby after suffering unimaginable pain. Skylar's attorneys said she decided to bury the baby in her backyard. They explained to the court that Skylar had originally planned to tell her family about her impending pregnancy but unfortunately did not have time to do so. Skylar's doctor informed her that she was due in 8 to 10 weeks. Therefore, Skylar thought she had enough time to attend prom and graduate from high school before talking to her mother. During the defense, an obstetrician testified that the baby had died before birth. The doctor argued that since Skylar did not admit to cutting the umbilical cord, it was possible that it had been severed before or during the baby's birth. The doctor also argued that Skylar's description of the baby's appearance was significant because she stated that the baby was white, suggesting that the baby may have died before birth. The obstetrician contended that a healthy newborn baby is not always pink. In fact, in his experience, newborns often have a purplish skin tone. Additionally, the doctor noted that Skylar had only gained 15 pounds during her pregnancy. He suggested that this limited weight gain could be a sign of an eating disorder, which might have restricted the baby's growth in the womb. The doctor's testimony aimed to question the accuracy of what Skylar told the police about the baby's health. Skylar's defense argued that she had only told the police what she wanted to say during questioning. They also claimed that she had not witnessed or participated in any harm to the child. Their goal was to cast doubt on the credibility of Skylar's testimony and suggest that other factors may have contributed to the child's death. Skylar Richardson's trial lasted a week, and the jury then reached its final verdict. The verdict came quickly, after just 4 hours of deliberation. They acquitted Skylar of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. However, Skylar was convicted of abuse of a corpse, a serious crime punishable by up to a year in prison. Skylar was held in custody until sentencing. During her sentencing hearing, she apologized for her actions and acknowledged the seriousness of the incident. The judge criticized Skylar or her role in the tragic death of her child. The judge was certain that if Skylar had made better decisions during her pregnancy, her child would still be alive. He severely criticized her actions and expressed disappointment that her choices led to serious consequences, including the death of her child. The judge also emphasized that Skylar's decisions were directly responsible for the child's death. The 3-year probation sentence for corpse abuse that the judge imposed on Skylar also served as a warning that her actions were morally unacceptable and against the law. In November 2020, another judge agreed to reduce Skylar's probation to 2 years early at the request of her attorney. During the hearing, Skylar expressed her desire to return to a normal life and asserted that she no longer needed supervision. Recognizing Skylar's progress, the judge decided not to allocate any more probation resources to her case. The judge made it clear that probation is not meant to be a punishment or a form of rehabilitation, but rather to give an individual the opportunity to prove why they should not face prison time. Since her acquittal, Skylar has made the most of this opportunity. She has successfully completed 2 semesters of college and works part-time at the law firm that represented her. Despite her acquittal, Skylar has faced many difficulties in finding a part-time job. She has often been denied job opportunities due to her criminal history. However, that has not stopped her from pursuing her career goals. She has expressed a desire to attend law school and become a defense attorney, hoping to use her knowledge to help others overcome similar hardships. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to parents Lisa Carter and Jay Poston. He had a close and loving relationship with his 3 sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Ryan spent a significant portion of his teenage years traveling and studying abroad, attending schools in both Switzerland and the Philippines. Ryan was known for his adventurous nature, exceptional physical appearance, and charismatic personality, made him a standout among his peers. After high school, he attended Indiana University, where he majored in political science, history, and geography. Ryan graduated with honors in 2005. Following his family's tradition, Ryan decided to pursue a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. Ryan had a profound respect for the legal profession, inspired by his grandfather and uncle, who were both attorneys. He had ambitious goals, one of which is the dream of owning a law firm. For the time being, Ryan worked in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he dedicated himself to offering affordable legal services to individuals who could not afford higher-priced attorneys. Although still young, Ryan had already built a considerable reputation. He attracted many clients seeking his advice and guidance. He worked diligently to ensure that everyone, regardless of their financial situation, had access to fair and competent legal representation. In 2011, Ryan has been through a painful breakup. He often visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, Kentucky, seeking comfort and support. On one of these visits, his life underwent a dramatic change after an encounter with Shayna Michelle Hubers. Originally from Lexington, Kentucky, Shayna was a Southern, and is the epitome of a true Southern girl, known for her extroverted and sociable personality. Her warmth and charm drew people to her. After graduating from high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she studied psychology at the University of Kentucky. She then pursued her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their age gap, Ryan, 29, and Shayna, 21, couldn't deny their strong feelings for each other. Whenever Ryan visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he ended up spending more time with Shayna, and their connection deepened. As their relationship grew, Shayna began to spend most of her weekends in Highland Heights, Kentucky, where Ryan lived. She'd pack her bags, head to his home, and take care of him, cooking and cleaning for him. As time passed, their feelings grew deeper and deeper. Ryan introduced Shayna to his parents. She couldn't hide her excitement from her friends, raving about Ryan, and shares her dream of becoming Ryan's wife. However, the promising future of Ryan and Shayna came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. On that day, Shayna called the authorities and reported that she had just killed her boyfriend, Ryan. According to Shayna, the incident began when Ryan attempted to physically abuse her. He allegedly dragged her out of the house when she tried to collect her belongings, and he confronted her with a gun. The situation became very tense and turned into a violent brawl, during which Shayna gained control of the firearm. Feeling intimidated by Ryan's, she panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting him. Believing Ryan was fatally wounded and wanting to end his suffering, she shot him several more times. Shayna believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she wanted to end his suffering. After the shooting, Shayna placed the gun on a bookshelf and called 911 to report the incident. When officers arrived, they requested her to exit the apartment with her hands raised. Despite initial hesitation, but she complied, following the officer's instructions to lie face down on the ground. Throughout that time, Shayna appeared visibly upset. After handcuffing Shayna and placing her in the patrol vehicle, the officers entered the apartment. Inside, they found Ryan Poston dead on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Investigators then arrived and surveyed Ryan's condo. The condo appeared somewhat messy, but not unusually so for a 29-year-old man. Further investigation revealed that Ryan had a permit to carry a concealed weapon and owned firearms. The gun used by Shayna to shoot Ryan was identified as his own Sig Sauer semi-automatic pistol. Based on evidence from the apartment, investigators concluded Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna started shooting. Blood on the table confirmed this. However, several items on the dining table were untouched, contradicting Shayna's account of a struggle. Typically, a fight would have knocked these items out of place. Investigators thoroughly examined Ryan's apartment for clues. Simultaneously, officers went door to door in the neighborhood to gather more information from Ryan's neighbors. A neighbor named Nikki provided valuable information to the detective. She knows Shayna well and feels Shayna is more responsible for the relationship than Ryan. Nikki reported that the couple often had loud arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Months earlier, Shayna had visited Nikki, crying and expressing her fear of Ryan. Shayna claimed that a violent altercation with Ryan had left her injured, and he threw her down the hallway. Nikki believed Shayna's story and urged her to report the incident to the police. However, Shayna decided not to do that. When Shayna was at the police station, detectives interviewed her about the shooting of boyfriend Ryan. Before they started the questioning, the officers told Shayna her rights, which informed her that she had the right to a lawyer. Shayna asked for a lawyer, so the questioning was put on hold. While she waited in the interrogation room, she filled out some paperwork, under the supervision of a detective. Shayna chose to speak with the detective despite asking for an attorney. When asked the name of the victim, Shayna showed no emotion, simply stating, "the man she killed," clearly referring to her long-term boyfriend, Ryan. During the interrogation, Shayna explained that she acted in self-defense. She claimed Ryan had physically attacked her, grabbing her throat and throwing her around their apartment. During a break in the interrogation, the detective stepped out of the room and another officer took over. Shayna then shared new information with the officer about her confrontation with Ryan. She stated that before the shooting, Ryan said mean and unpleasant things to her, calling her unhinged and taunting her while holding a gun. Shayna attributed Ryan's violent behavior that night to being under the influence of substances. She maintained her account of the incident leading up to the shooting, claiming Ryan was sitting at the dining table handling ammunition for his pistol. She caught him staring at her from across the table and believed this was a sign that he intended to kick her out of his condo. Shayna admitted to seizing the opportunity to grab the gun and shoot Ryan. In the midst of chaos, Shayna fired one shot at Ryan, hitting him. Shayna initially thought she needed to end his suffering, as he was twitching after the first shot, and proceeded to fire several more shots, ultimately resulting in Ryan's death. Shayna revealed in her confession that Ryan was self-conscious about his appearance, especially his nose, and had previously expressed a desire to get a nose job. With this knowledge, Shayna intentionally shot Ryan in the face, claiming she was granting his wish. Throughout the interrogation, Shayna revealed that she was worried her relationship would be affected if people found out her boyfriend was dead. Specifically, she feared that no one would want to marry her if they knew she had killed her boyfriend, even if it was in self-defense. After hearing her out, the detective arrested Shayna and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna appeared to be surprised by her arrest, insisting that she had only shot Ryan to protect herself, and apparently expecting a different outcome. In 2015, Shayna's trial started, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor began by comparing Shayna to Jodi Arias, another woman who had been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The similarities between the two cases were striking. This comparison increased the tension in the courtroom as everyone waited to see what would happen. The prosecutor argued that Shayna was fixated on her boyfriend, Ryan, and that he was all she could think about. According to the prosecution, Shayna's conversations were dominated by talk of Ryan. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a narrative of Ryan's intentions based on his friends' accounts. According to them, Ryan planned to end his relationship with Shayna and intentionally avoid her phone calls and texts. Despite these things, Shayna continued to show up at his condo in Highland Heights uninvited. The prosecution presented evidence that Ryan had plans to meet Audrey Bolt, the 2012 Miss Ohio, for a date on the night of the murder. This new information supported the prosecution's theory that Shayna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's new relationship. Audrey testified that she had arranged to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar that night and waited for him, but he never arrived. It was only later that she discovered he had been shot and killed. During Shayna's trial, the prosecution showed the jury evidence that Ryan had often expressed his wish to end their relationship. Shortly before his death, Ryan called his father, Jay, for advice on how to handle the situation. Jay told Ryan to be kind to Shayna to avoid an ugly breakup. Despite Ryan wanting to break up with Shayna peacefully, but she continued to manipulate him. On the day of Ryan's death, evidence showed that he spent a lot of time texting with Shayna. In these texts, Ryan clearly told her that he didn't want to see her that weekend because he had other plans. Nevertheless, Shayna showed up at his condo uninvited, which was a common occurrence. The prosecution argued that during the argument, Ryan told Shayna it was over and she could no longer control him. This enraged Shayna, who then shot Ryan in a fit of rage. In trial, the prosecution played a video of Shayna's interrogation to show the jury that she was a cold-blooded killer. The video showed Shayna dancing and singing, seemingly unaffected by the departure of her boyfriend, Ryan. After killing a loved one in self-defense, most people would be extremely upset, crying and overwhelmed by what they had done. By showing the video, the prosecution argued that Shayna was a very emotionless person and did not feel remorse for what she did, implying that she didn't act like someone who had killed in self-defense. However, this explanation is not objective and depends on the jury's perspective. The interrogation video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shayna. However, it was not the only evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense team stuck to a consistent story throughout the trial. They claimed that Ryan was the one who behaved erratically and violently on the night of the incident, which ultimately led to Shayna shooting him. To support this claim, the defense team described Ryan's state of mind. They alleged that the combination of medications he was taking, including anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines, is the cause. To strengthen their argument, Shayna's attorneys presented autopsy results to the jury, prove that Ryan was using these drugs at the time of his death. This evidence suggested that Ryan's actions may have been influenced by the medications he is taking. The defense also called an expert toxicologist to testify that combining anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines could lead to violent and paranoid behavior. The goal of this testimony was to create a plausible explanation for Shayna's actions and then prove that she killed Ryan in self-defense. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution was concerned that she would be acquitted because she was an intelligent, young, and beautiful woman. They worried that her self-defense claims might sway the jury. However, on April 23, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna Michelle Hubers of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shayna continued to blame Ryan for his death, which outraged his friends and family. Despite the evidence presented during the trial, Shayna maintained her innocence and refused to take responsibility for her actions. In Kentucky, a defendant who is a victim of domestic violence may be eligible for parole after serving 20% of their sentence. However, the judge did not grant Shayna this reduced parole, citing that she had committed a premeditated murder. Shayna was sentenced to 40 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in 17 years, in 2032, when she is 41 years old. Shayna appealed her sentence and was granted a new trial in August 2016. The appeal was granted because one of the jurors had a felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law, as felons are not allowed to serve on juries. In August 2018, after a 4-month delay, Shayna's second trial began. During opening arguments, Shayna's defense attorney stated that she had made every effort to please Ryan for the entire time they were together, a year and a half. But in the end, their love story encountered problems. According to the defense team, on the first night Shayna and Ryan met, he committed physical and sexual violence against her. This incident had a profound and lasting effect on Shayna, causing her to take several weeks to respond to Ryan's messages afterward. The defense claimed that Shayna's history of trauma began in high school when she was sexually assaulted. This led to her struggling with alcohol addiction and sexual promiscuity for many years. Her defense team argued that this traumatic experience significantly influenced her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense strategy aimed to create a sympathetic of Shayna by sharing her troubled past. They sought to prove that Shayna was not fully in control of her actions on the night of the murder. The defense hoped to show that Shayna's behavior was the result of a mix of factors. These factors included her history of abuse and her toxic relationship with Ryan. The goal was to show that Shayna was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Ryan, rather than a cold-blooded killer. The defense argued that Shayna's actions were not driven by a desire for revenge or financial gain. Instead, they were the result of years of abuse she suffered at the hands of Ryan. Shayna's defense attorney argued that Ryan's constant criticism about her weight and chest size, as well as his pressure on her to get breast enlargement, significantly affected her self-esteem. The defense claimed that this criticism, along with the strain in their sexual relationship, contributed to Shayna's feelings of inadequacy. The defense presented evidence that Shayna had sought medical help to improve their romantic life, getting an injection to address their sexual difficulties. However, Ryan's rejection and lack of interest made the problems in their relationship worse, leaving Shayna feeling frustrated and isolated. Additionally, the defense alleged that Ryan would often end things with Shayna and then talk to other women, further straining the problems in their relationship. During their opening statement, the prosecution told the jury that they wouldn't portray Ryan as a perfect boyfriend. However, they made it clear that he wasn't abusive. They claimed that Shayna shot and killed Ryan not in self-defense. The prosecution alleged that Shayna shot Ryan because he had ended their relationship on the night of the incident. Ryan had decided it was time to break up with Shayna because she would not leave him alone. According to the prosecution, Shayna's repeated returns to Ryan after he ended things demonstrated her inability to move on from the relationship. During the trial, the prosecution showed text messages from Shayna to her friends. These messages stated that the intimate activities between Shayna and Ryan had strengthened their relationship. However, when Shayna took the stand in her own defense during her second trial, she disagreed. She claimed that these activities had actually pushed them further apart. In another set of text messages, Shayna had asked to have sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants. The medication's side effects had reduced his sex drive. However, when Shayna testified, she alleged that Ryan had forced her into having sex. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Shayna Michelle Hubers of murdering Ryan Poston for the second time. Despite conflicting testimonies and evidence, they upheld their initial verdict. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally shared her daughter's singing talent and how it earned her multiple college scholarships. Choked with emotion, she asked the jury to consider the possibility of parole for Shayna. However, she acknowledged this didn't lessen the grief and suffering that Ryan's family was experiencing. Shayna Michelle Hubers was sentenced to life in prison without parole. She must serve at least 17 years before being considered for parole in 2032. She is serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Leslie Palacio. On the morning of the 29th, the family of Rosalia Palacio, a mother of 5 daughters, became concerned. Her eldest daughter, Kayla, noticed that Leslie's bed had been made, her belongings were missing, and it was clear that she had not spent the night at home. At first, one of the sisters joked that Leslie must have had a great time at the club and had probably slept over at Eric's house. However, everyone quickly became worried because Leslie had never done anything like this before. As they ate breakfast, Kayla kept checking her phone, expecting Leslie to text at any moment. But as time passed, there was still no news from Leslie. By noon, her mother Rosalia's anxiety grew. She decided to go to Eric's house to find out where her daughter Leslie was. When she arrived, she saw Eric's mother and sister moving furniture and other items out of the house. While this may have been a normal activity, the situation and Mrs. Ibra's tears made Rosalia feel uneasy. Something was wrong. When Rosalia asked about Leslie's whereabouts and why Eric's phone was not working, Eric's mother and sister insisted that they did not know Leslie had stayed with Eric the night before. Rosalia pressed them, asking if Leslie had stayed over, as her daughter had sent a text message saying she was going to Eric's house. When Eric's family denied this, Leslie's family began to realize that something was really wrong. Leslie's sister began searching for her by calling local hospitals and looking up accident reports from the past 24 hours online. However, she could not find any information about Leslie. The sister also tried to contact Eric, but his phone seemed to be turned off or had run out of battery, as it went straight to voicemail without ringing. Left with no other choice, Rosalia's mother decided to contact the police. On August 30th, the police officially listed Leslie as a missing person, marking the beginning of a long and intense battle for justice. Leslie Palacio was born on May 5, 1998, in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. She lived a short but full life, filled with love and care for her family. Leslie was known to be friendly and outgoing, bringing joy to those around her. She appreciated everyone she met and was appreciated in return. Leslie aspired to pursue a career in medicine. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in Las Vegas College of Medicine in 2020 to become a phlebotomist. She worked part-time as a lab technician, combining theoretical knowledge with practical skills. As a student, Leslie showed exceptional talent. Her academic performance was impressive and she grasped new concepts easily, always striving to expand her knowledge. This motivation prompted her to take up a part-time job as a lab assistant. Her colleagues consider her not only a reliable and professional lab technician, but also a kind and compassionate person. Leslie's responsibilities include conducting a variety of analyses and tests, but for her, this job is more than just a job requirement. She sees her purpose as making the testing process as comfortable as possible for her patients. Her caring and patient nature creates an atmosphere of trust that puts even the most anxious patients at ease. Leslie's enthusiasm and energy are evident in everything she does. By all accounts, she had the potential to become a sought-after expert in the field of medical laboratory diagnostics. However, one big turning point changed everything. Leslie has been caring for others since she was a child. The second of 5 daughters, she often took on the role of mother when her mother, Rosalia Palacio, was exhausted from cleaning hotels. One evening, after Rosalia had cleaned more than 15 hotel rooms, Leslie gently told her to rest while she prepared dinner. Leslie found cooking enjoyable and took it upon herself to make sure her family was well fed. She continued to prioritize her family's health, even when she was away. She would call home to check in to see if everyone had eaten, showing that family was her top priority. Her energy and ideas inspired her sisters, and she easily became a role model for them. During the pandemic, Leslie found a way to stay active by hosting workouts in her backyard. She taught her mother various exercises and danced daily with her sister in front of the mirror to music. Leslie's creativity also extended to experimenting with hair color and image, which inspired a business plan with her sister to open a fashion boutique. Together, they designed and sewed dresses at home in their own unique styles. When the pandemic forced Rosalia out of work, Leslie suggested that her mother start a small cleaning company and offered to help with the cleaning in her spare time. "We'll be fine, Mom, you'll see," Leslie reassured Rosalia. The family brainstormed a name for the company, settling on Palacio Cleaning Services. The family business had landed its first contract, but everything changed on August 29, 2020. Leslie had just finished her lab assistant program and the company received a large order. Feeling relieved, she decided to take a break and enjoy a night of dancing and fun. This was especially welcome as Las Vegas slowly began to return to normal after the pandemic restrictions were lifted. Leslie's friends didn't want to hang out with her, even though things were slowly returning to normal after a period of fear and anxiety due to the pandemic. People still felt uncomfortable being in crowded, enclosed spaces. Leslie didn't give up and posted on Instagram about wanting to go out for the evening. She was surprised to see Eric Rangel Ibra texting her. Their parents had attended the same church for 14 years, so Leslie and Eric had known each other since they were kids, but had never really interacted. Leslie knew about Eric's interests, and although he would text her and show interest, she only responded out of politeness. However, on this special day, Leslie made an exception to her usual routine and accepted Eric's invitation to spend time together. She wanted to add a little excitement to her usual life with a fun night out. After a long day of anticipation and no friends to join her, Leslie decided that sharing a fun night out with Eric was better than staying home. She wanted to have an exciting adventure, but had no idea that a series of terrible events were waiting for her. Although she tried to reassure herself that there was no reason to worry. Anyway, Leslie agreed with her sister that she would send her sister regular messages, telling her exactly where she was. She also told Kayla in great detail where she was going, with whom, and where she could go. After a while, the sister received a strange text message. "Can you believe Eric is completely sober tonight? We're at a party, but it looks like I'm going to have to party alone." The sisters then exchanged joking text messages about other topics. Eric and Leslie's first destination was the Longhorn Hotel Casino. Surveillance footage later reviewed by police showed the couple arriving in Eric's white Ford F-250 at 12:31 a.m. on August 29. They entered the casino and left shortly thereafter at 1:56 a.m. Leslie continued to communicate with her sister, updating her on their activities. At 4:40 a.m., Leslie sent her sister another strange text message. "I need to talk to you about something bad." Kayla asked what happened and, according to her, a text box popped up as if Leslie had started to reply, but there was no reply. That text message was Leslie's last. On the morning of the 29th, Leslie still had not returned home. As time passed, though Leslie's worries grew. Their initial certainty that Leslie had spent the night at Eric's house was replaced by confusion. The family decided to go to Eric's house, where they discovered a puzzling scene. Mrs. Ibra and her daughter were moving things out, pretending that they had just learned that Leslie and Eric had spent the night together. The Leslies arrived just in time. If they had arrived a few hours later, the investigation would have been significantly delayed due to the Ibras' suspicious actions. The police discovered blood stains in the house and a messy bedroom, suggesting that Eric's mother and sister had spent the day packing things, including furniture, instead of cleaning up evidence of the crime. This suggests that the family was planning a long-term escape, possibly to reunite with Eric and his father, Jose, in Mexico, where they had fled to avoid justice. However, when she met Leslie's family, Mrs. Ibra may have realized that their opportunity to leave had passed, leaving behind incriminating evidence. In a state of panic, Eric's mother and sister began to deny any knowledge of Leslie and Eric's evening together. It was this suspicious behavior that raised concerns that something terrible had happened. Fortunately, the Las Vegas Police Department acted immediately and sent out a payment investigation with the aim of tracking Leslie's movements since the previous night. However, it took some time to get the data. Leslie's family couldn't wait any longer, so they launched a campaign to spread information about Leslie's disappearance. People responded and started actively sharing information on social media. No one expected so many people to be interested. Eric's mother was especially surprised. On August 31st, Ms. Ibra went to the police station to file a missing person report for her husband and son. She informed the police that her son Eric had left home late on the evening of August 28 and returned the next morning, behaving strangely. She later saw him leave the house again, but he never returned. Police observed a strange situation when not only Leslie, but also Eric and his father were missing. This discovery prompted an investigation into the disappearance of all three. With the involvement of Las Vegas police, police began combing the neighborhood, looking for surveillance footage that might have captured important information. Fortunately, a breakthrough was made when surveillance cameras were discovered right across the street from Eric's house. Furthermore, police obtained payment data, which helped them piece together Leslie's movements in the early morning hours of the 29th. After reviewing this data, police learned that the couple had gone to the casino and then to a bar. Arriving around 2:15 a.m., Leslie's cell phone was left at the bar, and records showed that she left around 5:50 a.m. Shortly thereafter, at 6:05 a.m., Eric's car was seen pulling up in front of their house on neighborhood cameras. Eric helped Leslie out of the car and into the house, and it was clear that she was intoxicated. Then, at 7:25 a.m., Eric and his father Jose were seen carrying Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet, out of the house and placing it in the trunk of their car. Eric then drove away, while Jose used a hose to clean the driveway. These actions suggested that Eric and Jose were not missing, but rather were trying to escape justice. After reviewing the footage, police obtained a search warrant for Eric's home. During the search, police found significant additional evidence that Leslie had not left the house voluntarily. Despite efforts to clean the house with cleaning products, the evidence remained. Rubber gloves and trash bags were discovered, and a key piece of evidence was found in Eric's room. Blood was found on the floor and on Eric's bed, indicating that an assault had clearly taken place. Even without DNA testing, police were certain that the blood belonged to Leslie. Leslie Palacio was no longer missing, and police focused their efforts on finding her body. Police are actively searching for suspects Eric and Jose. Leslie's family, despite their grief, is still trying to enlist members of the church community to help find their daughter's body. As volunteers search, flyers and posters with Leslie's photo and images of Eric and Jose appear on social media and in newspapers. Leslie's family asked for the public's help in locating the two men involved in Leslie's death, as stated in the flyer. The first major break in the investigation came when a license plate reader detected Eric's car just 6 miles from his home around 10 a.m. on August 29th. He was on his way home just 4 hours after Leslie's murder. This new information led police to conclude that Eric's potential hiding spot was within a 4-hour drive of his home, possibly near the Nevada-Arizona border or the Charleston Peak area, a vast area of land. Police desperately needed more information to pinpoint a specific location. Fortunately, a gas station 40 miles north of Las Vegas captured footage of Eric's car leaving the freeway heading toward Valley of Fire National Park. The car returned 20 minutes later with mud on its tires. The discovery focused the search within a 20-mile radius of the gas station. Mud on the tires indicated that Eric had driven off the road at some point. Police searched the area, with volunteers combing hundreds of acres. On September 9th, during a second search effort, Leslie Palacio's body was discovered hidden near a bush. News of the 22-year-old's body being found near the Valley of Fire, 11 days after she went missing, quickly spread to news outlets. A reporter provided additional details about the prime suspect, 25-year-old Eric Ranglibarra. The extreme temperatures of the Valley of Fire, where Leslie's body was found, caused the body to decompose quickly, and forensic experts were unable to determine an exact cause of death. Locals were horrified and scared by Leslie's death. Some were afraid to go out because they constantly thought of the criminals involved in the murder. The day after Leslie's body was discovered, on September 10th, a large group of friends, relatives, neighbors, and people in the area gathered to remember Leslie. They placed candles from the night vigil outside Leslie's home and expressed their desire for the person responsible for her death to be held accountable. However, the pursuit of justice was not over. A significant breakthrough occurred when Eric's car was discovered in Moreno Valley, California. Police then contacted Eric's cousin, who revealed that he had driven Jose and Eric to San Pedro, where they were believed to have planned to cross the border into Mexico. Due to jurisdictional issues, the Las Vegas Police Department sought assistance from the FBI to further investigate the case. The investigation stalled until January 19, 2021, when Eric's father, Jose, turned himself in at the border. This development brought significant relief, as one of the fugitives was finally apprehended. Jose was quickly extradited to Clark County, where he faced charges of destroying evidence and being an accessory to murder. During questioning, Jose attempted to minimize his involvement in the crime, telling a story about his son's trip to Mexico on the morning of August 29th. However, police, shown surveillance video footage, dismissed his false claims. Footage clearly showed him helping carry Leslie's body out of the house and washing the driveway. Confronted with the evidence, Jose changed his story. He said he was working in the garage when Eric carried Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet, into the garage. According to Jose, he panicked and helped his son put the body in the truck, assuming that Leslie had died of an illegal drug overdose. Court records show that Jose initially told police that Eric claimed Leslie died of an illegal drug overdose. Jose also said that Eric expressed a desire to end his life, blaming himself for Leslie's death, and that Jose's father thought it best to take his son to Mexico. When asked about Eric's current location, Jose explained that they had entered Mexico and boarded a bus, but the bus was stopped and searched by Mexican police. This caused them to become frightened and separate. As a result, Jose claimed that he wanted to help with the investigation but did not know where his son was. On June 18, 2021, Jose Ibarra pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence and being an accessory to murder. Despite the seriousness of his crimes, he was sentenced to only 2 years in the Clark County Detention Center. This lenient sentence shocked and outraged Leslie's family and the community. Jose Ibarra attended the trial online, while Leslie's family and friends attended in person. They asked the judge to impose a harsher sentence, arguing that 2 years was not enough for someone who helped dispose of the body and hide the perpetrator. Jose Ibarra apologized to Leslie's family, saying that his love for his son had clouded his judgment. He expressed remorse for his actions, but Leslie's family did not accept his apology. They were still not satisfied, as Eric's whereabouts were still unknown and he continued to live freely in Mexico. Jose was released from prison on April 28, 2022, after serving 8 months and 15 days. This development outraged Leslie's family, who felt that justice had not been served. Their lawyer, Ophelia Markarian, expressed her frustration, saying it was unfair that the prime suspect was still at large while a person involved in the cover-up of the murder was freed after a short sentence. Leslie's case highlights significant flaws in the justice system, raising concerns about the fairness of how serious crimes are handled. The Leslie family is committed to fighting to change Nevada law to ensure that those involved in the murder face prison terms longer than the current 2 years. They are determined to find the perpetrators, prosecute them and punish them appropriately in the United States. Ophelia Markarian is using media interviews to reach out to anyone with information about Eric's whereabouts in Mexico, calling for justice for the Leslie family, even if it is only a small part. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of the Winkler family. Matthew Brian Winkler was born on November 21, 1974, in Henderson, Tennessee. He was the youngest of 3 sons, with 2 older brothers, James and Daniel. Matthew's parents, Dan and Diane Winkler, were deeply religious and they raised their sons very strictly. It is worth noting that Matthew became a 5th-generation church pastor. His father, Uncle Michael, grandfather Wendell, great-grandfather Merlin Winkler and great-grandfather Merlin Paul Winkler Sr. have all been pastors of the gospel. Matthew grew up in a respected family. His father was the head of the local preacher's school and was a well-known figure in their hometown. As a result, Matthew and his brother attended Sunday school and actively participated in church activities. Outside of church, Matthew excelled in high school soccer, with many believing he had the potential to become a world-class athlete. As the head of the family frequently traveled for his preaching activities. He was often accompanied by his wife and children. As a result, their children, including Matthew, attended multiple schools during childhood. Despite this, he was an outgoing and friendly child who easily made friends in each new place. When Matthew finished high school, his family was living in Austin, Texas. He was a charismatic person but didn't excel academically. Following graduation, Matthew attended Freed-Hardeman College and graduated successfully. During his time at college, Matthew began developing his pastoral skills under his father's guidance. He served as the youth minister at the Central Church of Christ in McMinnville. He was later appointed as the preacher at the Church of Christ located on 4th Street in Selmer, Tennessee. Mary Carroll was born in December 1973 in G Township, Tennessee. She was the elder of 2 sisters, raised by parents who were deeply devoted to their Christian faith. In fact, her father was a pastor at the local church, where Mary and her younger sister attended Sunday school. A few years after Mary was born, Mary's parents had a second daughter. She was born prematurely and had serious health issues, including cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and intellectual disabilities. This was very challenging for her parents to accept, so they looked for different treatments and even tried experimental therapy to help her. Unfortunately, none of these treatments led to improvements in her health. Mary loved her younger sister dearly and always tried to care for her with kindness and compassion. In 1987, tragedy struck when Mary's 10-year-old sister suffered an epileptic seizure while bathing. Mary had briefly left the room to retrieve something from the bathing accessories, and by the time Mary returned, her sister was no longer breathing. Despite efforts to revive her sister, but she passed away. For Mary, a 13-year-old girl, this was a big shock and the first loss in her life. She was shaken. Consumed by guilt and self-blame, Mary struggled to cope with her grief and she had a nervous breakdown. Mary teachers, concerned about her well-being, referred her to the school psychologist. The therapy sessions were very effective, but they did not last long. When her father discovered the therapy sessions, he became outraged and forbade Mary from continuing, insisting that family problems should be kept within the family. Unfortunately, Mary never received real attention from her parents. Mary grew up as a shy and modest person. After her younger sister's tragic death, causing Mary to become increasingly withdrawn and struggled with the emotional trauma. Her father did not allow her to seek help from therapists, which led to serious psychological problems over time. Years later, Mary's parents decided to adopt a young girl named Charlotte from a troubled large family. Shortly after, they also welcomed Charlotte's 2 brothers and sister into their home, reuniting the siblings. As the older sibling, Mary took care of the younger children and helped her mother. Around the same time, Mary met Matthew, who had just graduated from high school. He was charming, handsome, and popular among girls. However, his strict religious upbringing prevented him from freely expressing his romantic feelings. Despite this, Mary and Matthew quickly hit it off, which soon blossomed into love. As their feelings grew deeper and deeper, they decided to take the next step. After a few months, they introduced each other to their parents, who gave their blessing. With their parents' approval, Mary and Matthew began planning their wedding, which took place in April 1994. When Matthew's family welcomed their first daughter, Patricia, his college education was temporarily postponed. To support his family, he worked at a construction site, but he only did it for a short time because he was not used to hard physical labor. This was when Mary began to notice that Matthew had a difficult temperament. He would often get angry over nothing, become easily irritated, and have trouble controlling his temper. Mary, a gentle and quiet young woman, decided not to speak out about the issues she faced, and instead she kept her family problems to herself. Mary brought up in a patriarchal household. She had been taught to obey her husband without question. Initially, the Winklers lived close to Mary's parents, allowing her to visit them frequently. However, their lives took a turn for the worse when Mary's mother, Mrs. Freeman, was diagnosed with cancer. The disease progressed rapidly, and she passed away within a few months. This loss was another blow to Mary. Now she has the responsibility of taking care of her little siblings. Mary's situation became increasingly complex during this time due to her second pregnancy. Following the birth of their second daughter, the family relocated to a new city where they purchased a small home. After the move, Mary became fully devoted to caring for her baby, which led to her nearly ceasing communication with her father and younger siblings. Their constant need for attention overwhelmed her, which further strained their relationships. Additionally, Mary's struggling with severe postpartum depression. Those close to the Winkler family noticed changes in Mary's behavior and personality that seemed unusual and concerning. As an introverted person with sociophobic tendencies, she found it challenging to connect with others and form friendships. She gets upset easily, and any little thing can bring her to tears. During this period, as Matthew's career as a pastor progressed, Mary grew increasingly withdrawn. The situation further deteriorated when she became pregnant for the third time, and a few months later, discovered that the fetus had not survived, adding to her emotional pain. This news was devastating for Mary, who had been eagerly anticipating the arrival of this child. Several months earlier, Mary had been overjoyed when she finally became pregnant after a 2-year wait, signaled by the 2 long-awaited lines on her pregnancy test. However, Mary's happiness was tempered by fear, and she chose to keep her pregnancy a secret for a long time. Eventually, as her condition became more noticeable, people around her began speculating about her unusual behavior and private life. Those who knew Mary closely believed that her unusual behavior was due to the severe trauma she experienced in her childhood, which had taken a toll on her emotional well-being. Behind closed doors, Matthew and Mary's seemingly perfect marriage was far from ideal. Matthew would often shout and snap at his wife, Mary, for no apparent reason, much to the concern of their neighbors. Despite her efforts to maintain a facade of a happy marriage, the truth began to unravel when Mary appeared with a huge black eye. Although she claimed it was an accident, rumors quickly spread about the pastor's violent behavior towards his wife. The tension in their relationship worsened when Matthew had a growing desire to try new things in the bedroom, and he suggested to his wife that they experiment with role-playing, adult toys, and other activities. However, these ideas were met with strong disapproval from Mary. She had been raised in a conservative and strict family, found these ideas to be completely unacceptable. As a result, she firmly told Matthew that she would not engage in such activities. This led to Matthew becoming angry and frustrated, and he repeatedly attempted to force Mary to give in to his desires. The situation became increasingly unbearable for Mary, who suffered abuse from her husband in the bedroom. She eventually confided in her closest friend, tearfully sharing her struggles and asking for kept confidential. Unfortunately, her friend knew the promise and instead shared the information with others. The incident led to widespread rumors about the pastor's behavior, Matthew, damaging his reputation within the community. At that time, Matthew is being promoted and desires to become a local church leader. Nevertheless, his aspirations were dashed due to the swift spread of unflattering rumors about him. Matthew suffered further consequences, was dismissed from Sunday school, where he had previously been in good standing and had successfully taught God's word to the children. The decision this him was prompted by complaints from parents who had also heard about the pastor's strange hobbies. Matthew. As a result, the family Matthew had to move house there and relocate to a different city in search of a fresh start. They eventually settled in Selmer, where soon gained the affection and respect of the people around them. Matthew resumed his role as a church pastor, while his wife, Mary, took on a part-time job to help supplement the family's income. Although their family is not yet peaceful, Mary and Matthew presented themselves as an ideal couple, making their family seem like a model to their neighbors and church congregation. They had become close friends with a young married couple who lived next door, often visiting and sharing holidays, news, and secrets. A few months before the tragedy happened, during a dinner at their house, Mary proudly told their friends that Matthew had bought her a gun for self-defense. He had already taken her to the shooting range several times to teach her how to use it. Mary turned out to be a quick learner, mastering the skills and accurately hitting her targets. It was discovered that the Winkler already had firearms in their home. These guns had been previously purchased by Matthew for self-defense. The guests found it puzzling that he and Mary needed so many firearms, given that they lived in a peaceful town where they had no known enemies and were well respected by everyone. Mary and Matthew faced financial difficulties after moving to a new house. Mary began looking for part-time work and also pursued a medical degree in order to secure a job at a clinic and care for sick children. Mary then decided to commit financial fraud in an attempt to improve her family's financial situation. She claimed she didn't realize her actions were illegal and intended to repay the money once her finances improved. Specifically, she inflated her bank accounts by adding false funds. Mary received checks from unknown sources, totaling almost $177,000, and deposited them into a joint account with her husband. Her substantial deposits caught the attention of bank employees, and they invited Mary and Matthew to the bank branch to discuss and clarify the transactions. Mary and Matthew failed to appear at the bank, which heightened the suspicions. It was initially assumed that Matthew was unaware of his wife's actions. On March 22, 2006, the quiet town of Selmer, Tennessee, was shaken by a shocking crime. The body of 31-year-old Pastor Matthew Winkler was found in his home, a victim of murder. The news became even more alarming as it was discovered that Matthew's wife, Mary, and their 3 young daughters, 8-year-old Patricia, 6-year-old Maria Eliza, and 1-year-old Brianna, had mysteriously disappeared. Matthew's absence from the evening church service at Christ Cathedral was very unusual. As a responsible person, he usually informed others if there were any changes to his plans, so his failure to attend was suspicious. The situation became more alarming when numerous phone calls to his family's home went unanswered. The neighbors decided to go to Matthew's house to find out what had happened and if they needed any help. From the outside, the house appeared normal, the windows and doors were intact, and there was nothing suspicious. Inside, there were lights on in several rooms, and they could hear a rather loud television coming from one room. This shows that the homeowner is probably busy doing their own thing, but no one answered when they knocked on the front door. The door was locked, and subsequent phone calls also went unanswered. It was impossible for them to see inside through the curtained windows, leaving them unsure if anyone was actually present. Even though the situation appeared unusual, the neighbors did not call the police. Instead, they called an elder in the community, and he suggested finding a spare key to open the door. It took an additional hour and a half to find a key, but once they entered, they encountered a strange and unsettling atmosphere. The interior of the house was perfectly intact, with no signs of forced entry, but the owners were missing. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but this sense of normalcy changed when they entered the master bedroom. In Matthew and Mary's bedroom, they witnessed a horrifying sight. The pastor's Matthew body lay on the floor, in a large pool of blood. A massive gunshot wound had torn through his back, with blood splatters covering the surrounding area and dried, bloody foam on his face. The body had stiffened, indicating that it had been lying there for many hours. Matthew was still dressed in his pajamas, suggesting that he was likely shot in the morning. It was not until this time that the police officially received a call reporting this tragic incident. By the time the police arrived, a large crowd had gathered around the house, including neighbors, church members, and people passing by. However, the presence of this crowd caused big problems for the investigation. As they stood around, they unknowingly left behind fingerprints and inadvertently damaged or destroyed evidence, making it much harder for investigators to do their job. The police took the victim's, Matthew's body for a forensic examination, which revealed that he was shot once in the back with a large caliber gun. The wound caused massive blood loss, leading to his death just a few minutes later. Sadly, he was unable to call for help before succumbing to his injuries. It was impossible to confirm whether any strangers were in the house during the crime because the evidence was damaged by those who came before the police. The crime scene was unusual, and key witnesses seemed to have vanished. The whereabouts of the wife and daughters of Matthew remained a mystery. The police suspected that Mary and children might have been kidnapped or possibly murdered. In addition to their disappearance, the family's minivan was also missing from the garage. A large-scale search operation was initiated, prompting a yellow alert from the state, which signaled that children were missing. As a result, all citizens were asked to remain vigilant and assist in locating them. Mary's disappearance raised suspicions when her husband, Matthew, was found murdered in their home. Authorities worried that Mary and daughters might also be in danger and issued a notice searching for them. At first, police believed Mary was a victim due to her timid personality. However, as they dug deeper and collected more evidence, including financial information and witness statements from neighbors, the focus shifted, and Mary became the primary suspect in her husband's murder investigation, Matthew. It was essential to locate Mary as soon as possible and determine the whereabouts of the children, ensuring their safety. The family and their vehicle were immediately added to the missing list. Authorities also attempted to track Mary's bank card transactions and locate her using her mobile phone signal. Mary was discovered the next day in a resort town in Alabama, where she and her children were enjoying themselves at a local amusement park. It seemed as though she wanted to give her children a final, memorable experience, possibly because she knew she would soon be facing prison time. When the family was questioned at the police station, the two older daughters recounted the story with confidence. They explained that intruders had broken into their house, injured their father, and their mother had used a gun to protect them. They were then forced to flee to save their lives. According to the girls, their father was recovering in the hospital, and they expected to visit him soon and then return home. Patricia and Maria Eliza did not witness the incident that occurred in their house. Instead, they learned about them from their mother's account, Mary. All they knew was that they heard a gunshot and caught a glimpse of their father lying on the floor. Their mother quickly put them in the car and they drove away from the scene. Although Mary initially confessed, but then she stated that she couldn't recall the entire sequence of incident due to a temporary lapse in memory. Mary alleged that her husband, Matthew, had been emotionally and physically abusing her for years. He would often humiliate her and coerced her into having sex according to his will. Mary claimed it was Matthew who initially conceived the financial scam and she only did as he said. Matthew was known to have a short temper, would become enraged easily, and had a history of physical violence. His former secretary corroborated these allegations, stating that she frequently saw Matthew yell at his wife, who would bring him lunch at church, but he would always find fault with something she did. The evening before the murder, a heated argument broke out between Mary and her husband, Matthew, resulting in them spending the night in separate rooms. Mary was distraught and spent the entire night crying. The next morning, still distraught, she inadvertently picked up the loaded shotgun her husband kept in the house. With the gun in hand, she went to Matthew's room and shot him in the back while he was still in bed. He collapsed to the floor, bleeding profusely and gasping for air. He tried to speak and managed to whisper a single question to Mary, "Why?" In response, she simply said, "Sorry, so sorry." Mary then took her daughters and left the house. Despite his attempt to call for help by reaching for the phone, Matthew didn't have the strength to make the call. The murder weapon was discovered in the trunk of the car Mary had used to transport the children. It remains unclear why she took it with her. At the trial, Mary was unable to provide an explanation. A key piece of evidence presented at the trial was the role-playing costumes found at Mary's residence. These pieces of evidence proved that Matthew had forced his sexual desires on his wife and how he had abused her. Mary's reaction upon seeing the costumes was striking. She initially turned pale and then became hysterical. Despite providing multiple, conflicting accounts of the events, the court ultimately concluded that she was a victim of domestic abuse. The court found that Mary's years of accumulated feelings of anger, resentment, and pain eventually led to the murder. Despite acknowledging her history of abuse, the court still held Mary accountable for her actions. In April 2007, the court reached its final decision. Mary Winkler was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, but her mental state at the time has caused much controversy. Initially, it was anticipated that Mary would face a minimum prison sentence of 6 years. However, she was ultimately sentenced to less than 1 year. A portion of this sentence, Mary spent 2 months in a psychiatric hospital where experts evaluated her mental fitness to regain custody of her children. Upon Mary's release in summer 2008, she was given custody of her daughter, who had been living with their paternal grandparents. However, Matthew's parents were outraged by this decision, as they firmly believed Mary was responsible for their son's death and felt Mary hadn't received an adequate punishment. They were further distressed by the thought of their granddaughter being cared for by the woman they thought had intentionally killed their son. Despite multiple attempts to appeal the custody decision, they were unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the fraud case against Mary was dropped, as the bank chose not to file formal charges and pursued the matter no further. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Mackenzie Sherilla. Mackenzie Sherilla was born in August 2004 in Strongsville, Ohio. The youngest of 3 children, Mackenzie received a lot of love and pampering from her parents, John Sherilla and Natalie Stevens. Her parents prioritized her education and encouraged she to pursue every goal she loved. Being the youngest also gave her a tolerance. She was often forgiven for many of her mischievous pranks during her childhood, and even when she committed some more serious mistakes, she would still be forgiven by her parents. Mackenzie grew up as a spoiled and entitled girl who often got her way. Her parents gave in to her demands, which led her to believe she could act however she wanted without consequence. As a young child, she was kind and friendly, but as she grew older, her behavior and character began to deteriorate. If things didn't go her way, she would throw tantrums, lose her temper, and use bad language. She was prone to physical altercations and would often disregard others. Mackenzie only cared about her own opinions and desires, insisted on getting her way, and prioritized her own interests above all else. During his teenage years, Mackenzie became very difficult and unbearable personality, but her parents never thought it was out of the ordinary. To them, her behavior was a normal part of growing up and a phase she would eventually outgrow. They chose to respond with understanding and patience. However, Mackenzie's behavior worsened over time. In high school, she started using alcohol and occasionally experimenting with illicit drugs, often managing to avoid consequences for her actions. Her reckless behavior not only endangers herself but also the people around her. Mackenzie's parents seemed to be unaware of, or possibly chose to ignore, the obvious issues their daughter was facing. Like many teenagers, she was glued to her smartphone and frequently posted provocative photos and comments on social media. Her actions weren't unusual among her friends, as they often engaged in vandalism, fought, stole, and had run-ins with the police. However, they rarely faced serious consequences, typically receiving only warnings and educational discussions, which may have led them to believe that they could act as they pleased without facing repercussions. Dominic Russo, a young man from Strongsville, was a stark contrast to Mackenzie. Born in September 2001, he was the fourth of 7 children to Frank and Christine Russo. Growing up, Dominic was close to his 3 brothers and 3 sisters. He was an exemplary student, actively participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Throughout his childhood, Dominic excelled academically, participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Despite being part of a large family, Dominic and his siblings never lacked parental love, attention, or care. Frank and Christine Russo were moderately strict but also supportive of their children's interests. As a result, Dominic always had a lot of friends and was accustomed to being the center of attention. His attractive appearance and charming personality made him a popular figure, and he had many admirers from a young age. However, Dominic preferred to focus on meaningful relationships rather than fleeting romances. After completing high school, Dominic attended a local university, specializing in performing arts with a focus on music production. His ambition was to become a renowned music producer, and he was also a skilled singer-songwriter. By the time he was 20, Dominic had established his own business, purchased a car, and was living in a rented apartment in a good neighborhood. Additionally, he excelled as a student and athlete at the university. Dominic first met Mackenzie at a mutual friend's party. This chance encounter turned out to be pivotal for both of them. As complete opposites, they found themselves drawn to each other. Dominic, with his charming and cultured demeanor, quickly caught Mackenzie's eye. He was distinctly different from the people she normally socialized with, possessing qualities that set him apart. He was well-educated, well-mannered, and engaging, able to effortlessly converse on a wide range of topics. Mackenzie had a striking appearance and a slender figure that caught people's attention. She knew how to present herself and often relied on her charm to make an impression. Mackenzie quickly won over the guy she had been interested in, Dominic, and by fall 2021, they started dating. Not long after that, the two introduced each other to their families. While Mackenzie's parents were thrilled with her choice, considering the guy an excellent match for their daughter, Dominic's parents had mixed feelings about Mackenzie. They found her endearing and innocent at first, but there was something about her that immediately raised concerns for Frank and Christine Russo. Those close to Mackenzie believed she had truly fallen in love for the first time, and they hoped this relationship would have a positive impact on her life. Unfortunately, no one could have predicted the tragic endings that would eventually bring their romance to an end. As Mackenzie and Dominic spent more time together, they began to appear in public, holding hands and showing affection for each other. It wasn't long before the entire small town knew about their relationship. While some people who knew Mackenzie well felt sorry for her boyfriend, Dominic, most were simply happy for the couple. As time passed, Dominic started to notice strange behavior in Mackenzie. She was constantly defiant and tried to get everyone to do what she wanted. At first, Dominic thought her behavior was due to her youth and desire for attention. Despite her behavior, the couple made plans for their future, discussing marriage as soon as Mackenzie turned 18. They also hoped to leave their small town and move to a big city, such as New York, where Dominic could pursue a music career and showcase his talent. Over time, Mackenzie's behavior became increasingly alarming and sometimes frightening to Dominic. She asks him to do what she wants, and if he doesn't agree with her, she gets angry and acts very nasty. Dominic initially disregarded Mackenzie's controlling behavior as a joking matter, but then he soon realized her true nature. In public, she maintained a composed exterior, but when they were alone, she took out her anger on him and sometimes attacked him. Dominic felt he couldn't stand his girlfriend any longer and proposed a temporary separation to reconsider their feelings. However, Mackenzie responded by having a very breakdown in front of their mutual friends. She yelled, threatened to harm Dominic if he ended the relationship, and even threatened to burn down his house and wreck his car. These actions had the opposite effect of what Mackenzie intended. This makes Dominic even more want to end their toxic relationship. Mackenzie was determined to hold on to her boyfriend, refusing to acknowledge the end of the relationship. Initially, she acted as though nothing was wrong, continuing to call Dominic and invite him to various parties and events. She also posted affectionate photos of the two on social media, express her love for him. However, when Dominic made it clear that the relationship was over, Mackenzie's behavior changed. She became furious and began showing up at his house almost daily, standing under his window and shouting insults and threats. She also resorted to calling him from different phone numbers, leaving messages on his answering machine, and sending emails. In these messages, Mackenzie's tone was inconsistent. Sometimes she will gently express her feelings for him and offer to restart the relationship. However, there are times when she will use insults and threats against Dominic. Dominic was baffled by Mackenzie's behavior, having never experienced anything similar before. He struggled to respond and tried various approaches, including talking to her and ignoring her. He also documented her aggressive outbursts using his phone. The situation became unbearable as Mackenzie would publicly scream at and insult Dominic whenever she saw him, making his life extremely difficult. Despite this, Dominic held on to the hope that with time, Mackenzie would eventually leave him alone and move on. Mackenzie made a shocking statement in front of witnesses, saying it would be easier for her to kill Dominic than to let him move on from her. She threatened that if he didn't return to her, she would make sure no one else could have him. At first, Dominic didn't take her words seriously, but those around him knew she was not joking. Her threats also included hitting and running him over with a car, driving him off a cliff, or stopping on railroad tracks in front of an oncoming train. She described each scenario in detail, as if she had already planned it out. However, Mackenzie soon realized that her threats and insults only pushed Dominic further away. She decided to change her tactics, switching from being aggressive to being sweet and charming again. She stopped pressuring and harassing Dominic and pretended to have learned from her mistakes, wanting to change for the better. She started talking about college plans, asking for his help in choosing a university, and claiming that she had become more focused on her studies, particularly her upcoming final exams. Dominic was pleasantly surprised by the changes in Mackenzie and, still having feelings for her, he decided to help her with her university enrollment. As they started seeing each other again, they gradually rekindled their closeness. Dominic began taking her on dates and spending all his free time with her, thinking she had become more mature and responsible. He fell in love with her again without even realizing it, and their past issues seemed to fade away. This time, they kept their reunion private and didn't tell their friends and acquaintances about it. Therefore, their dates are private and discreet, allowing them to enjoy their time together without seeking outside attention. When Dominic's brother Angelo found out, he warned that nothing good would come of it. But Dominic didn't listen, because he loved her too much, so he didn't pay attention to his brother's words. Dominic thinks that Mackenzie has changed positively after they reunited, but he had no idea what she was really planning. Unbeknownst to him, Mackenzie had devised a sinister plan to exact revenge on he. She became obsessed with the idea of a disastrous car accident. She would spend her free time traveling around the city and looking for the perfect place to carry out her plan. Mackenzie considered crashing into a steep cliff or stepping in front of the train, but she couldn't find cliff nearby and thought the idea of blocking the train was untrustworthy. One day, while driving through an industrial area, she stumbled upon a secluded spot with no cameras or traffic. A massive brick wall caught her attention, and her twisted imagination quickly conjured up a new and equally horrific plan. She decided that accelerating to top speed and crashing into the wall would be just as spectacular as the other ideas she had considered. Initially, Mackenzie had planned to end her life alongside her lover, Dominic, intending for their tragic story to become a cautionary tale for the entire city. She had confided in her best friend about this plan, but her friend thought she was joking because she had had such wild ideas before. In late July 2022, just days before Mackenzie's 18th birthday, she asked Dominic if he wanted to attend a mutual friend's party with her. She told him that it would be the perfect opportunity for them to have some fun, relax, and make it clear to everyone that they were back together and deeply in love. Dominic quickly agreed, as he still trusted Mackenzie and didn't question her feelings or intentions. On the night of July 30th, Dominic and Mackenzie arriving at the party holding hands. Their entrance caught everyone's attention, and they looked happy and in love as they openly displayed their affection for each other. Their friends were genuinely thrilled to see them reunited but notice how well-suited the couple was. When night fell, Dominic and Mackenzie freely took photos, kissed and enjoyed their time together without any hesitation. However, no one had any idea that this joyful celebration would take a devastating turn. Dominic and Mackenzie drank some alcohol, like other people at that party, but Mackenzie secretly took a dose of illegal drugs, for courage, to not change her mind at the last minute and slammed on the brakes. The next morning, Dominic and Mackenzie bid farewell to the guests and began to head out to their car. However, they were approached by a friend of the guy, Davion Flanagan, who requested a ride home in their vehicle. Mackenzie tried to decline request, said that they had made other plans, but Dominic didn't see any problem with driving his friend home. Mackenzie eventually relented, and she agreed to give Davion a ride home. Mackenzie took the driver's seat, with Dominic beside her and Davion behind him. They left the party venue and headed onto the main road. Mackenzie drove cautiously, adhering to the speed limit and avoiding drawing attention to themselves. When they approached an empty intersection, she stopped at the red light. As they waited, Davion dozed off, allowing her to reconsider her intentions. In her later statement, Mackenzie claimed she had planned to die in an accident, but her words were discredited by the fact that she had buckled her seatbelt during the previous stop, while Davion remained unbuckled. As the light turned green, Mackenzie suddenly accelerated and took a sharp turn onto a poorly lit secondary road that led into an industrial area. Dominic and Davion seemed unaware of what was happening, and the cars sped up as if Mackenzie had lost control. Pressing hard on the gas pedal, she careened the vehicle toward a brick wall. Luckily, a witness happened to be in the area. On an early Sunday morning, the industrial area was deserted, with no other people around to see the accident or offer assistance. However, a woman who lived near the scene heard the crash and went outside to find out what's happening. Seeing smoke and realizing a car had crashed, she quickly returned to her home to call for emergency help. About 30 minutes after the accident, medics arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, Davion and Dominic in the car succumbed to their injuries and died instantly. Mackenzie, however, was fortunate to have survived thanks to her seatbelt and airbags. Mackenzie, the driver, was unconscious and trapped in the wreckage with severe leg injuries, but she was breathing and had a palpable pulse, giving hope that she will survive. During the process of being freed from the car, Mackenzie briefly regained consciousness but she appeared disoriented and unaware of her surroundings. Once released from the vehicle, she was immediately rushed to the hospital for treatment. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed Mackenzie with multiple fractures and viscera injuries. Blood tests also revealed that she had been under the influence of both alcohol and drugs at the time of the accident. The police initially received leads and a confession in the investigation. After learning the results of Mackenzie's tests, it was thought that she was under the influence of addictive substances and didn't understand her actions. It's possible she tried to drive through the wall or didn't notice any obstacles, as there was no sign of braking. Since Mackenzie was unconscious in the intensive care unit after a complex operation, the police couldn't question her at first. When she regained consciousness, she became hysterical and confessed to the doctor, saying she deliberately crashed into the wall to kill Dominic and initially intended to die with him. Mackenzie also said that Dave was an unintended victim because he was hitchhiking in their car. Doctors dismissed Mackenzie's confession, believing it was a delusional state caused by anesthesia, painkillers, and grief over her boyfriend's death. However, when the police spoke with Mackenzie, her story changed completely. This time, Mackenzie said she remembered almost nothing about the incident of that night due to consuming alcohol and using illegal substances. Mackenzie claimed she had a memory lapse after getting in the car and had no idea how Davion ended up in the car. However, evidence contradicted this. Surveillance footage tracked the car's initial route and showed Mackenzie driving cautiously and following the rules until she suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial area. Furthermore, it was discovered that Mackenzie had previously driven the entire route days earlier, and her car had been spotted by multiple witnesses. After being discharged from the hospital, Mackenzie quickly recovered and attempted to resume her disinterested life. She showed no remorse for her actions and was confident about evading consequences. She became active on social media again, met with friends, and made future plans. By September, she even attended a concert in a nearby city, featuring her favorite band, seemed unaffected by her boyfriend's passing. Mackenzie lived an active life despite having her legs in a fragile state. She would often appear at concerts in a wheelchair, wearing vibrant makeup and taking selfies to share on social media. Just a month after recovering, Mackenzie attended a Halloween party in a pre-made costume where she met new people and enjoyed herself. However, her life has changed completely on November 4, 2022, when she was taken into custody. The investigation gathered enough evidence to bring the case to trial. Mackenzie was charged with premeditated aggravated double murder and possession of a controlled substance found in her pocket and detected in her blood. However, during the trial, Mackenzie changed her testimony multiple times. Initially, she claimed to have memory loss, but when her friend testified against her, revealing her plan, she shifted her defense. Mackenzie then claimed she had intended to die alongside her lover, but this was disproven when it was discovered she had secured herself with a seatbelt. Mackenzie Sherrill was found guilty of all charges on August 21, 2023. However, due to her age at the time of the crime, just 5 days shy of her 18th birthday, the court took this into consideration and tried her as a minor. Under state law, Mackenzie was eligible for consecutive 15-year prison sentences without parole for each murder she committed. However, due to her young age, the court decided to let her serve these sentences simultaneously. This meant she would be eligible for parole in 15 years. By that time, Mackenzie would be 33 years old. Both the prosecution and defense expressed displeasure with the court's decision. Dominic family members felt the sentence was too lenient, and they intended to appeal for a stricter punishment. On the other hand, Mackenzie's parents and lawyer believed the sentence was too harsh and decided to appeal as well. The judge refused to change the sentence, questioning whether Mackenzie would be released after 15 years in prison. In his opinion, Mackenzie showed no remorse for her actions and displayed arrogance towards the court. The extended prison term would provide her with ample time to reflect on the gravity of her crimes.